Dan Marino. When people think of the greatest NFL players never to win a Super Bowl, the first name that usually comes to mind is Dan Marino. Drafted by the Miami Dolphins in 1983, Marino immediately redefined what was possible for a quarterback. In just his second season, he threw for an unprecedented 5,084 yards and 48 touchdowns, records that stood for decades, and led Miami to Super Bowl 19. At the time, it seemed inevitable that Marino would play in many more Super Bowls and eventually win one. His lightning-quick release, fearless downfield passing, and chemistry with receivers like Mark Clayton and Mark Duper made the Dolphins one of the league's most explosive teams. Marino was named the 1984 NFL MVP and went on to make 9 Pro Bowls across a 17-year career. But after that lone Super Bowl appearance, Marino never got back. Despite his brilliance, Miami's defenses and running games often fell short, and the team could never quite put together the complete roster needed to get him over the top. Marino retired after the 1999 season with 61,361 passing yards and 420 touchdowns, both NFL records at the time, but with no championship ring. Fran Tarkenton. Drafted in 1961 by the Minnesota Vikings, Tarkenton immediately made a name for himself as one of the league's most unique players. Long before scrambling quarterbacks became common, Tarkenton was improvising outside the pocket, dodging defenders, and extending plays with his legs. Across an incredible 18-year career, Tarkenton played 13 seasons with the Vikings and 5 with the New York Giants. He became the NFL's all-time leader in passing yards, 47,003, and touchdowns, 342 by the time he retired. He was a 9-time Pro Bowler, a league MVP in 1975, and one of the faces of the NFL during the 1970s. But for all his success, the Super Bowl eluded him. Tarkenton led the Vikings to 3 Super Bowl appearances in 1973, 1974, and 1976, but each ended in disappointment. Minnesota's defenses and running game often carried them deep into the postseason, but when faced with NFL powerhouses like the Dolphins, Steelers, and Raiders, the Vikings came up short. Tarkenton's teams scored a combined 27 points across those 3 Super Bowls. He retired in 1978 as the NFL's most prolific passer. Warren Moon. Warren Moon's path to NFL greatness is unlike any other, and his story is as much about perseverance as it is about talent. After going undrafted in 1978, despite a standout career at the University of Washington, Moon wasn't given a fair chance in the NFL as a black quarterback in an era when teams still held biases against players at the position. Instead, he went north to the Canadian Football League, where he carved out an incredible legacy with the Edmonton Eskimos. Moon led Edmonton to 5 straight Grey Cup championships from 1978 to 1982, establishing himself as one of the best quarterbacks in the world. His rocket arm, deep ball accuracy, and leadership left no doubt he belonged in the NFL. Finally, in 1984, he got his chance when the Houston Oilers signed him. Over the next 17 NFL seasons, Moon became one of the most prolific passers the league had ever seen. He threw for more than 49,000 yards and 291 touchdowns in the NFL alone, earning 9 Pro Bowl selections and leading the league in passing yards twice. When combined with his CFL numbers, Moon finished his professional career with over 70,000 passing yards, a staggering total that places him among the most productive quarterbacks of all time. But despite his brilliance, Moon never reached a Super Bowl. His Oilers teams made the playoffs 7 straight years, but could never break through, often undone by turnovers, defensive lapses, or the loaded competition of the AFC in the late 1980s and early 90s. The most painful example came in the 1992 playoffs, when Houston blew a 35-3 lead to the Buffalo Bills in the largest comeback in NFL history. Moon was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2006, becoming the first black quarterback to be enshrined. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed and dropped a like for the algorithm. Philip Rivers. Philip Rivers is one of the most consistent and productive quarterbacks the NFL has ever seen, but despite his brilliance, he never reached a Super Bowl. Drafted in 2004 by the New York Giants and then traded to the San Diego Chargers in a blockbuster deal involving Eli Manning. Rivers quickly became the face of the Chargers franchise. Over a 17-year career, Rivers was the model of durability and toughness. He started 240 consecutive games, the second longest streak by a quarterback in NFL history, and he did so without missing time, even when battling serious injuries. Known for his fiery competitiveness and unique sidearm throwing motion, Rivers put up massive numbers, more than 63,000 passing yards and 421 touchdowns, which both rank among the top 10 all time. He was selected to 8 Pro Bowls and consistently carried the Chargers offense. Despite all of that success, the big game moments never broke his way. Rivers led the Chargers to 6 playoff appearances, including the 2007 AFC Championship game. In that game, he famously played through a torn ACL, gutting it out on one leg in a losing effort against Tom Brady's Patriots. That was the closest he ever came to the Super Bowl. After that, postseason heartbreak became a theme. Blown leads, missed opportunities, and running into dynasties like the Patriots and Steelers all blocked Rivers' path. Later in his career, he joined the Indianapolis Colts for one season in 2020, leading them to the playoffs again, but once more fell short. He retired in 2021. Jim Kelly. Few players in NFL history symbolize both greatness and heartbreak like Jim Kelly. Drafted in 1983, Kelly initially chose the USFL over the NFL, starring for the Houston Gamblers before joining the Buffalo Bills in 1986. When he arrived, Buffalo transformed almost overnight into one of the league's most dangerous teams. Kelly became the leader of the famed K-Gun offense, a fast-paced, no-huddle attack that kept defenses off balance and maximized the skills of Thurman Thomas, Andre Reed, and James Lofton. With Kelly at the helm, the Bills dominated the AFC in the early 1990s, reaching an unprecedented 4 straight Super Bowls from 1990 to 1993. But those appearances became both Kelly's greatest accomplishment and his most painful legacy. Buffalo lost all 4 games, beginning with the infamous wide right in Super Bowl 25, when kicker Scott Norwood missed a potential game-winning field goal. The following years brought even more heartbreak, a blowout loss to Washington, then back-to-back defeats at the hands of the Dallas Cowboys. Kelly retired after the 1996 season with more than 35,000 passing yards and 237 touchdowns. He was a 5-time Pro Bowler, a first-ballot Hall of Famer, and the face of the most successful era in Bills history, Barry Sanders. When the conversation turns to the greatest NFL players of all time, not just running backs, Barry Sanders is always mentioned. Drafted by the Detroit Lions in 1989 after a record-breaking Heisman season at Oklahoma State, Sanders instantly became one of the most electrifying players the league had ever seen. At just 5 feet 8 inches and 200 pounds, Sanders didn't look like a typical NFL superstar. But once he touched the ball, he was magic. His unmatched vision, agility, and ability to stop and start on a dime turned defenders into highlight reel victims every Sunday. Over 10 seasons, Sanders rushed for 15,269 yards, 99 touchdowns, and averaged an incredible 5.0 yards per carry. He went to the Pro Bowl in every single season of his career, and won the NFL MVP in 1997 when he rushed for 2,053 yards. Despite his brilliance, Sanders' team rarely gave him the support he deserved. The Lions made the playoffs 5 times during his career, but only won a single postseason game. Surrounded by weak rosters, inconsistent quarterbacks, and poor organizational leadership, Sanders carried Detroit, but it was never enough to reach a Super Bowl. In 1999, at just 30 years old, Sanders shocked the football world by retiring abruptly, still at the peak of his abilities and just 1,457 yards shy of breaking Walter Payton's all-time rushing record. Fans were stunned, but Sanders later explained that he had grown weary of playing for a franchise that wasn't committed to winning. LaDainian Tomlinson. Few players have ever dominated the NFL the way LaDainian Tomlinson did in his prime. Drafted 5th overall in 2001 by the San Diego Chargers, LT combined speed, power, vision, and versatility to become one of the most complete running backs in football history. Tomlinson wasted no time making an impact. Across 11 seasons, he rushed for 13,684 yards, 145 touchdowns, and added another 4,772 receiving yards with 17 touchdowns through the air. His ability to contribute as both a runner and receiver made him the prototype for the modern all-purpose back. He went to 5 Pro Bowls, earned 3 All-Pro selections, and is a member of the NFL's 2000 All-Decade Team. His greatest season came in 2006, when Tomlinson had arguably the most dominant year ever by a running back. He rushed for 1,815 yards, scored an NFL record 31 total touchdowns, and won the league MVP award. The Chargers went 14-2 that year, giving fans hope that LT would finally get his shot at a Super Bowl. But in the playoffs, San Diego fell in heartbreaking fashion to Tom Brady and the Patriots, and the closest Tomlinson would come to the big game was an AFC Championship loss in 2007. In 2017, Tomlinson was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Earl Campbell is remembered as one of the most punishing running backs to ever play the game, a player whose style defined toughness in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Drafted first overall by the Houston Oilers in 1978, Campbell was an instant force. In his rookie year, he rushed for 1,450 yards and 13 touchdowns, winning both Rookie of the Year and Offensive Player of the Year. He wasn't just good, he was dominant from the moment he stepped onto the field. Campbell's running style was pure power. At 5 feet 11 inches and 232 pounds, he combined size and speed in a way that defenders simply weren't prepared for. Tackling Campbell was like trying to stop a freight train, and his highlight runs often showed him bulldozing entire defenses. He won the NFL rushing title 3 straight years, 1978 to 1980, was a 3-time Offensive Player of the Year, and earned 5 Pro Bowl selections. Despite his individual brilliance, Campbell never reached the Super Bowl. His Oilers teams came close, reaching consecutive AFC championship games in 1978 and 1979, but both times they were defeated by the Pittsburgh Steelers dynasty. Injuries also began to take their toll on Campbell as his physical running style wore down his body, cutting short his peak years. By the time he retired in 1985, Campbell had rushed for over 9,400 yards and 74 touchdowns. He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1991, cementing his legacy as one of the greatest running backs in history. Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson is often described as the last great workhorse running back, a player whose combination of size, speed, and sheer determination made him one of the most dominant rushers in NFL history. Drafted by the Minnesota Vikings in 2007, Peterson wasted no time making an impact, winning Offensive Rookie of the Year after rushing for 1,341 yards and 12 touchdowns in his debut season. From the start, Peterson built a reputation for highlight reel runs and unbelievable power. At 6 feet 1 inch and 220 pounds, he could bulldoze defenders, but also had breakaway speed, making him nearly impossible to stop. Over his 14-year career, he amassed 14,918 rushing yards and 120 rushing touchdowns, ranking among the top backs in NFL history. His crowning achievement came in 2012 when he returned from a torn ACL and MCL suffered the year before to rush for 2,097 yards, the second most in a single season in league history. He fell just 9 yards short of Eric Dickerson's all-time record. That year, Peterson won the NFL MVP award, becoming the last non-quarterback to claim the honor. But despite all of his accomplishments, Peterson never reached a Super Bowl. He played in just 8 playoff games across his career, going 3-5 in those contests. His playoff highlight was a 2009 NFC Championship run, but the Vikings fell to the Saints in overtime, 1 step short of the Super Bowl. Eric Dickerson. Eric Dickerson is one of the most iconic running backs in NFL history, known for his upright running style, trademark goggles, and record-breaking production. Drafted 2nd overall by the Los Angeles Rams in 1983, Dickerson made an immediate impact, winning Offensive Rookie of the Year after rushing for 1,808 yards and 18 touchdowns, one of the best rookie seasons ever. But he wasn't done. In just his second season, 1984, Dickerson set the NFL's single-season rushing record with 2,105 yards. That mark still stands today, nearly 40 years later, a testament to his blend of speed, vision, and power. Over the course of his Hall of Fame career, Dickerson amassed 13,259 rushing yards and 90 touchdowns, earning 6 Pro Bowl nods and 5 first-team All-Pro selections. Despite his personal dominance, team success never followed. Dickerson's Rams reached the NFC Championship in 1985, but they were shut out 24-0 by the Chicago Bears' legendary defense. After being traded to the Indianapolis Colts in 1987, he continued to put up huge numbers, even leading the league in rushing twice more. But his teams never made it to the Super Bowl. O.J. Simpson. Before his name became synonymous with controversy outside of football, O.J. Simpson was one of the most dominant running backs in NFL history. Drafted first overall by the Buffalo Bills in 1969 out of USC, Simpson entered the league with sky-high expectations and quickly became the face of the franchise. Nicknamed the Juice, Simpson was a rare blend of power and track star speed. He was the first player in NFL history to rush for over 2,000 yards in a single season, accomplishing the feat in 1973 with 2,003 yards. And remarkably, he did it in just 14 games. That record-setting season helped earn him the NFL MVP, and his electrifying style made him one of the most popular players of the decade. Over his 11-year career, Simpson rushed for 11,236 yards and 61 touchdowns, earning 6 Pro Bowl selections and 5 first-team All-Pro honors. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1985, remembered on the field for redefining what a running back could do and putting the Buffalo Bills on the NFL map. But despite his individual brilliance, Simpson never played in a Super Bowl. The Bills of the 1970s often lacked the supporting cast to contend, making just one playoff appearance during his time in Buffalo: Randy Moss. When it comes to pure talent at wide receiver, few names in NFL history carry the same weight as Randy Moss. Drafted in the first round of the 1998 NFL Draft by the Minnesota Vikings, Moss immediately proved why many called him a once-in-a-generation athlete. In his rookie season, he caught 17 touchdown passes, an NFL rookie record, and helped Minnesota's offense become one of the most explosive units the league had ever seen. Moss was the ultimate deep threat. At 6 feet 4 inches with world-class speed and leaping ability, he could stretch defenses in ways no one had before. He went on to record 156 receiving touchdowns, the second most in NFL history, and over 15,000 receiving yards. He was a 6-time Pro Bowler, 4-time first-team All-Pro, and a member of both the NFL's 2000 All-Decade Team and the NFL's 100th Anniversary Team. Despite his dominance, Moss never won a Super Bowl. His best chance came in 2007 with the New England Patriots. That season, he caught 23 touchdown passes, still the single-season record for receivers, as the Patriots went 16-0 in the regular season. But in Super Bowl 42, New England was stunned by the New York Giants, who ended their perfect season with a 17-14 upset, leaving Moss still without a ring. Moss also appeared in Super Bowl 47 with the San Francisco 49ers, but once again fell short, this time losing to the Baltimore Ravens. Larry Fitzgerald. Few players in NFL history have combined talent, loyalty, and class the way Larry Fitzgerald did. Drafted 3rd overall by the Arizona Cardinals in 2004, Fitzgerald quickly established himself as one of the league's most complete wide receivers. Known for his impeccable hands, crisp route running, and quiet leadership, he became the face of the Cardinals franchise for over 15 years. Fitzgerald's career numbers are staggering. He retired with 1,432 receptions, 17,492 receiving yards, and 121 touchdowns, ranking second all-time in both catches and yards, trailing only Jerry Rice. He was an 11-time Pro Bowler, a first-team All-Pro in 2008, and was named to the NFL's 100th Anniversary Team. But his greatness wasn't just about stats. it was about reliability. Fitzgerald famously dropped only 29 passes on more than 2,300 targets in his career, a level of consistency almost unmatched in league history. His most iconic moment came during the 2008 postseason. Fitzgerald put together one of the greatest playoff runs ever, catching 30 passes for 546 yards and 7 touchdowns in 4 games. In Super Bowl 43, he gave the Cardinals the lead late in the fourth quarter with a 64-yard touchdown catch, sprinting past the Steelers' defense in a play that looked like it might deliver Arizona its first championship. But Pittsburgh answered with Santonio Holmes' legendary toe-tap touchdown, and the Cardinals' dream ended in heartbreak. Despite years of individual brilliance, Fitzgerald never won a Super Bowl. The Cardinals reached the NFC Championship again in 2015, but fell to Carolina, and Fitzgerald never got another shot at the big game. Calvin Johnson. Known to the world as Megatron, Calvin Johnson was one of the most unstoppable wide receivers to ever play the game. Drafted second overall by the Detroit Lions in 2007, Johnson was a 6'5", 237-pound freak of nature with 4.3 speed and unmatched leaping ability. From the moment he stepped onto the field, he was a mismatch against any defender. Too big for corners, too fast for safeties, and too strong for anyone to jam at the line. Over just 9 seasons, Johnson put together a Hall of Fame career. He finished with 731 receptions, 11,619 yards, and 83 touchdowns. He was a 6-time Pro Bowler, 3-time first-team All-Pro, and became the face of the Lions during a turbulent era. In 2012, he broke Jerry Rice's single-season receiving record with 1,964 yards, a mark that still stands today. That same year, he posted 8 straight 100-yard games, another NFL record. Despite his brilliance, Johnson never came close to a Super Bowl. The Lions were plagued by instability and mismanagement throughout his career, making the playoffs only twice with him on the roster, losing both games. For all his dominance, Detroit could never build a contender around him, and Johnson often shouldered the weight of carrying an entire offense by himself. Frustrated by years of losing and battling through constant injuries, Johnson retired in 2016 at just 30 years old, stunning fans much like Barry Sanders had a generation earlier. Even with the shortened career, his impact was undeniable. Johnson was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2021 on his first ballot. Andre Johnson. Andre Johnson was one of the most complete wide receivers of his era, combining size, speed, and consistency to dominate defenses for over a decade. Drafted 3rd overall by the Houston Texans in 2003, he immediately became the face of a young franchise. At 6 feet 3 inches and 230 pounds with sprinter's speed, Johnson was nearly impossible to cover one-on-one. Over 14 seasons, Johnson put up huge numbers despite often playing with inconsistent quarterback play. He finished his career with 1,062 receptions, 14,185 yards, and 70 touchdowns, earning 7 Pro Bowl selections and 2 first-team All-Pro honors. From 2006 to 2013, he was one of the most dominant receivers in football, with back-to-back 1,500-yard seasons in 2008 and 2009 that cemented his reputation as a nightmare for opposing secondaries. What makes Johnson's resume even more impressive is how he produced despite playing most of his prime years in relative obscurity with the Texans. For much of his career, Houston struggled to find stability at quarterback, cycling through names like David Carr, Matt Schaub, and Case Keenum. Johnson was often double-teamed, but still managed to put up Hall of Fame-level production year after year. The biggest missing piece, of course, was a Super Bowl. Johnson made only 4 playoff appearances, all with Houston, and never advanced past the divisional round. Terrell Owens, better known as T.O., was one of the most electrifying and controversial wide receivers in NFL history. Drafted in the 3rd round by the San Francisco 49ers in 1996, Owens rose from small school obscurity, UT Chattanooga, to become a superstar. His combination of size, speed, and strength made him nearly unguardable, and his flair for the dramatic kept him in the spotlight. Owens finished his career with 1,078 receptions, 15,934 yards, and 153 touchdowns, ranking among the top 3 in nearly every major receiving category. He was a 6-time Pro Bowler, 5-time first-team All-Pro, and was named to the NFL's 2000 All-Decade team. He is widely considered one of the top 5 wide receivers of all time. The peak of Owens' career came during the 2004 season with the Philadelphia Eagles. After breaking his leg late in the year, Owens returned in time for Super Bowl 39 against the New England Patriots. Incredibly, despite still being injured, he delivered one of the most heroic performances in Super Bowl history, catching 9 passes for 122 yards. But the Eagles fell short, losing 24-21, and it would be the closest Owens ever came to a championship. Tony Gonzalez. Tony Gonzalez is universally regarded as the greatest tight end in NFL history, but for all of his dominance, he never won a Super Bowl. Drafted in the first round by the Kansas City Chiefs in 1997, Gonzalez spent 17 years redefining the position with his consistency, athleticism, and longevity. By the time he retired, Gonzalez had caught 1,325 passes for 15,127 yards and 111 touchdowns. At the time, he ranked second in career receptions among all players, not just tight ends, behind only Jerry Rice. He was a 14-time Pro Bowler, 6-time first-team All-Pro, and a member of both the NFL's 2000 All-Decade team and the NFL's 100th anniversary team. What made Gonzalez so unique was how complete he was. He could block, he could run routes like a wide receiver, and he had some of the surest hands in the sport. He was especially dangerous in the red zone, where his size and athleticism made him nearly impossible to defend. For nearly 2 decades, he was the gold standard for tight ends. Despite his individual greatness, team success eluded him. Gonzalez spent 12 years with the Chiefs, where he often put up incredible numbers, but was surrounded by mediocre rosters. In Kansas City, he played in only 3 playoff games, losing all of them. After being traded to the Atlanta Falcons in 2009, he finally experienced more postseason success, making the NFC Championship game in 2012. That was the closest he came to a Super Bowl, as the Falcons fell to the 49ers after squandering a second-half lead. Antonio Gates. Antonio Gates is one of the greatest tight ends in NFL history, yet like Tony Gonzalez, he never managed to win a Super Bowl. What makes Gates' story even more remarkable is that he never played a single snap of college football. Instead, he was a basketball star at Kent State, leading the Golden Flashes to the Elite Eight of the 2002 NCAA tournament. After graduation, NFL scouts saw his size, athleticism, and leaping ability, and envisioned him as a tight end. The San Diego Chargers signed him as an undrafted free agent in 2003, and it became one of the greatest finds in league history. Gates immediately proved he belonged. By his second season, he was a star, catching 81 passes for 964 yards and 13 touchdowns in 2004. He was named a first-team All-Pro that year and became a central weapon for quarterback Phillip Rivers throughout the 2000s. Gates finished his career with 955 receptions, 11,841 yards, and 116 touchdowns, the most touchdown catches ever by a tight end. He was an 8-time Pro Bowler, 3-time first-team All-Pro, and one of the most consistent red zone threats the league had ever seen. His basketball background showed up in his game. He used his body to box out defenders the way he once did under the rim, and his footwork and hands were elite. Despite all the success, team accomplishments never followed. Gates and the Chargers had loaded rosters featuring Rivers and LaDainian Tomlinson, and they reached the AFC Championship in 2007, but they fell short against the New England Patriots. That was the closest Gates ever got to the Super Bowl. Anthony Munoz. When it comes to offensive linemen, Anthony Munoz is often cited as the greatest to ever play the position. Drafted 3rd overall in 1980 by the Cincinnati Bengals, Munoz anchored their offensive line for 13 seasons, becoming the gold standard for left tackles. His blend of size, strength, footwork, and technique was decades ahead of his time, and he protected quarterbacks' blind sides better than anyone in the league. Munoz's accolades are staggering. He was named to 11 Pro Bowls and earned 9 first-team All-Pro selections. He was also a member of the NFL's 75th anniversary team, 100th anniversary team, and the 1980s All-Decade team. In 1998, he became the first Bengal inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Simply put, he was the prototype for the modern offensive tackle. His career also included rare versatility. Despite being a lineman, Munoz was athletic enough to catch touchdown passes on tackle-eligible plays, finishing with 4 career receiving touchdowns. That unique combination of power and athleticism made him one of the most complete players in NFL history. But as great as Munoz was, team success eluded him. The Bengals reached the Super Bowl twice during his career, Super Bowl 16, 1982, and Super Bowl 23, 1989, but lost both times to the San Francisco 49ers. In Super Bowl 23, Cincinnati was heartbreakingly close, only for Joe Montana to lead a game-winning drive in the final minutes. Bruce Smith. Bruce Smith is the NFL's all-time sack leader and one of the most feared defensive players to ever step on the field. Drafted first overall by the Buffalo Bills in 1985, Smith quickly became the cornerstone of their defense and went on to dominate for nearly 2 decades. Standing 6 feet 4 inches and 265 pounds, Smith combined speed, power, and technique in a way few pass rushers ever have. Across 19 seasons with the Bills and Washington, he racked up an incredible 200 career sacks, a record that still stands. He was a nightmare for opposing quarterbacks, routinely blowing past blockers and wrecking game plans. His resume is loaded with accolades: 11 Pro Bowls, 8 first-team All-Pro selections, 2-time NFL Defensive Player of the Year, and a spot on the NFL's 100th anniversary team. He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2009, universally recognized as one of the greatest defensive ends in history. But for all of his individual dominance, Smith never won a Super Bowl. He was the defensive leader of the Buffalo Bills during their historic run of 4 straight Super Bowl appearances from 1990 to 1993, but each ended in heartbreak. Alan Page. Alan Page is one of the most dominant defensive linemen in NFL history, a player whose impact went far beyond sacks and tackles. Drafted by the Minnesota Vikings in the first round of the 1967 NFL Draft, Page became the cornerstone of the team's legendary Purple People Eaters defensive line alongside Carl Eller, Jim Marshall, and Gary Larson. Page's quickness and strength were revolutionary for his era. While most defensive tackles of the time were primarily space eaters, Page was explosive off the snap, penetrating the line of scrimmage and wreaking havoc in the backfield. Over his 15-year career, he was named to 9 Pro Bowls, 6 first-team All-Pro selections, and became the first defensive player to win the NFL MVP award in 1971. He was also a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year and was named to the NFL's 100th anniversary team. Despite all of his dominance, Page never won a Super Bowl. The Vikings reached the big game 4 times during the 1970s, Super Bowls 4, 8, 9, and 11, but lost each one. Whether it was the Chiefs, Dolphins, Steelers, or Raiders, Minnesota could never get over the hump. Page was a force in every game, but he walked away without a championship. After his playing days, Page's legacy only grew. He earned a law degree and became an associate justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court, showing that his brilliance extended far beyond the football field. His career is remembered as one of excellence, leadership, and impact, even without a ring. Derek Thomas. Derek Thomas was one of the most feared pass rushers of his generation, a relentless edge presence who terrorized quarterbacks throughout the 1990s. Drafted 4th overall by the Kansas City Chiefs in 1989, Thomas immediately made an impact, winning Defensive Rookie of the Year and setting the tone for what would become a Hall of Fame career. Blessed with an explosive first step and an endless motor, Thomas piled up sacks at a remarkable pace. Over 11 seasons, he recorded 126.5 career sacks, still the franchise record for Kansas City. He made the Pro Bowl 9 times, was a first-team All-Pro selection twice, and in 1990, he set the still-standing NFL single-game record with 7 sacks against the Seattle Seahawks. Thomas wasn't just a sack artist, though. He forced fumbles, disrupted blocking schemes, and struck fear into offensive coordinators every week. He was the heart and soul of the Chiefs' defense for over a decade, leading them to consistent playoff appearances in the 1990s. Yet despite his individual brilliance, Thomas never won a Super Bowl. The Chiefs made the postseason in 7 of his 11 years, but they never advanced past the AFC Championship game. He came close in 1993, when Kansas City fell to the Buffalo Bills one step short of the big game. Tragically, Thomas's life and career were cut short in 2000, when he died at just 33 years old following a car accident. His passing left the NFL world stunned, as he was still one of the league's premier defensive players, J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt is one of the most dominant defensive players of the modern NFL era, and his resume stacks up with the greatest defenders of all time. Yet, he never managed to win a Super Bowl. Drafted 11th overall by the Houston Texans in the 2011 NFL Draft, Watt quickly developed into a force of nature at defensive end. From 2012 to 2015, Watt put together one of the most dominant 4-year stretches in league history. He won Defensive Player of the Year 3 times, 2012, 2014, 2015, joining only Lawrence Taylor and Aaron Donald in that elite category. In 2014, he recorded 20.5 sacks, 29 tackles for loss, and 5 total touchdowns, including 3 on offense, putting together one of the most remarkable all-around seasons the NFL had ever seen. Watt was nearly unblockable, combining size, strength, and relentless effort with incredible athleticism for a 6'5", 290-pound lineman. Watt finished his career with 114.5 sacks, 195 tackles for loss, and 27 forced fumbles, along with 5 Pro Bowl selections and 5 first-team All-Pro honors. He was named to the 2010s All-Decade Team and will be a first-ballot Hall of Famer. But for all his individual brilliance, Watt never played in a Super Bowl. The Texans made the playoffs several times during his career, but they could never get past the divisional round. Injuries and inconsistent quarterback play often kept Houston from becoming a serious contender, and Watt's prime years were spent carrying a franchise that never had enough around him. Junior Seau. Junior Seau was the heart and soul of the San Diego Chargers for nearly 2 decades, and one of the most respected linebackers the NFL has ever seen. Drafted 5th overall in 1990 out of USC, Seau immediately became the emotional leader of the Chargers' defense, known for his relentless energy, sideline-to-sideline speed, and bone-jarring hits. Seau was the definition of durability and excellence. Over 20 seasons with the Chargers, Dolphins, and Patriots, he earned 12 Pro Bowl selections, 6 first-team All-Pro honors, and a spot on the 1990s All-Decade Team. His leadership was as valuable as his production. Teammates often described him as the heartbeat of any locker room he was in. The peak of his team's success came in the 1994 season, when Seau led the Chargers to their first and only Super Bowl appearance in franchise history. In Super Bowl 29, however, San Diego was overpowered by Steve Young and the San Francisco 49ers, losing 49-26. Despite Seau's best efforts, that game would be his only Super Bowl appearance. Later in his career, he joined the 2007 New England Patriots, who went 18-0 into Super Bowl 42, only to fall in one of the biggest upsets in NFL history to the New York Giants. Individually, Seau's resume was beyond reproach: 1,849 tackles, 56.5 sacks, and 18 interceptions across 2 decades. He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2015, remembered not only as one of the greatest linebackers of all time, but also as one of the most beloved and respected leaders the NFL has ever had. Patrick Willis. Patrick Willis is remembered as one of the most dominant linebackers of his generation, a player who defined the San Francisco 49ers defense during their return to prominence in the early 2000s. Drafted 11th overall in the 2007 NFL Draft, Willis wasted no time making an impact. He won Defensive Rookie of the Year and quickly became known for his combination of speed, strength, and instincts. Over his 8-year career, Willis earned 7 Pro Bowl selections, 5 first-team All-Pro honors, and a spot on the NFL's 2010s All-Decade team. At middle linebacker, he was the complete package. He could stuff the run, blanket tight ends in coverage, and deliver bone-rattling hits. Alongside Navarro Bowman, he formed one of the most feared linebacker duos in the league. The pinnacle of his team's success came in the 2012 season, when the 49ers advanced to Super Bowl 47 under head coach Jim Harbaugh. Willis and the defense led a furious comeback after falling behind 28-6, but in the end, San Francisco came up just short, losing 34-31 to the Baltimore Ravens. 2 years later, Willis and the 49ers were back in the NFC Championship, but again fell short of the Super Bowl, this time to the Seattle Seahawks. Injuries cut his career short, and Willis retired after just 8 seasons in 2014. Despite the brevity of his career, his impact was enormous. A player who, during his prime, was arguably the best defensive player in the NFL. His dominance earned him induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2024. Brian Urlacher. Brian Urlacher was the heart and soul of the Chicago Bears defense in the 2000s, a player who embodied toughness, athleticism, and leadership at the linebacker position. Drafted 9th overall in the 2000 NFL Draft out of New Mexico, Urlacher quickly made his presence felt, winning Defensive Rookie of the Year and becoming the face of the franchise. At 6 feet 4 inches and 250 pounds, Urlacher had rare speed for his size. He could drop into coverage like a safety, fly sideline to sideline against the run, and deliver crushing hits over the middle. Over his 13-year career, he recorded over 1,300 tackles, 41.5 sacks, and 22 interceptions. He earned 8 Pro Bowl selections, 4 first-team All-Pro honors, and was named the 2005 NFL Defensive Player of the Year. He was also selected to the NFL's 2000s All-Decade team and later enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2018. The peak of Urlacher's team success came in the 2006 season when he led the Bears to Super Bowl 41 against Peyton Manning and the Indianapolis Colts. The game started perfectly. Devin Hester returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown, but Chicago's offense struggled mightily, and Urlacher and the defense couldn't contain Manning forever. The Bears lost 29-17, leaving Urlacher without the championship that would have capped his legacy. Champ Bailey. Champ Bailey is widely considered one of the greatest cornerbacks in NFL history, a player who combined elite athleticism, intelligence, and consistency over a 15-year career. Drafted 7th overall by Washington in 1999, Bailey quickly became a lockdown defender, earning Pro Bowl honors in just his second season. In 2004, he was traded to the Denver Broncos, and that's where his career truly flourished. Bailey went on to become a cornerstone of Denver's defense for a decade, earning a remarkable 12 Pro Bowl selections, the most ever for a cornerback, and 3 first-team All-Pro honors. His coverage skills, ball hawking ability, and knack for shutting down opposing number one receivers made him one of the most respected defensive backs of all time. One of Bailey's most famous plays came in the 2005 playoffs when he intercepted Tom Brady in the end zone and returned it 100 yards, flipping the game's momentum. It remains one of the signature moments of his career and a perfect example of his ability to change a game in an instant. Despite his individual greatness, Bailey never won a Super Bowl. His closest chance came in the 2013 season when he was part of the Broncos team that reached Super Bowl 48. However, Denver was overpowered by the Seattle Seahawks' Legion of Boom, losing 43-8 in one of the most lopsided Super Bowls ever. Bailey retired in 2014 with 52 interceptions, 203 pass deflections, and a reputation as one of the purest cover corners the game has ever seen. He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2019, a first-ballot selection that cemented his place among the legends of the game. Antonio Brown. From 2013 to 2018, Antonio Brown was the most productive wide receiver in football. He had 6 straight seasons with over 100 catches, led the league in receiving twice, and built a near-unstoppable connection with Ben Roethlisberger in Pittsburgh. Week after week, he created separation with precise footwork, exploded after the catch, and celebrated with signature touchdown dances that became part of the league's culture. He was a 6th-round pick who turned himself into the face of the franchise and a future Hall of Famer. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. In 2018, after a late-season conflict with teammates and coaches, Brown skipped practice, was benched in Week 17, and quickly fell out with the organization. He demanded a trade, torched the team publicly, and was eventually sent to the Raiders. That's where the unraveling sped up. In Oakland, he clashed with coaches, refused to wear league-approved helmets, skipped training camp, and posted recorded phone calls of John Gruden online. He was released before ever playing a game. Just days later, he signed with the Patriots. 1 week in, he faced serious accusations of sexual misconduct, and within 11 days, he was released again. He spent the next year out of football, battling lawsuits, filming erratic live streams, and publicly calling out league officials, owners, and teammates. In 2020, he returned to the NFL on a short leash with Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He contributed during their playoff run and caught a touchdown in the Super Bowl. But less than a year later, during a game against the Jets, he removed his jersey mid-game, threw his gloves into the stands, and walked off the field, never to return. Henry Ruggs III. The Raiders drafted Henry Ruggs 12th overall in 2020, making him the first wide receiver off the board in a historically stacked class. He was known for one thing above all else. At Alabama, he ran a 4.2 740 and turned short routes into touchdowns with ease. In the NFL, Las Vegas planned to use him as their deep threat, their field stretcher, their next game changer. By his second season, it started to click. He was averaging over 19 yards per catch and had already caught 2 long touchdowns through 7 games. The Raiders were winning, and Ruggs was finally becoming a focal point of the offense. Then, everything stopped. On November 2nd, 2021, Ruggs was involved in a high-speed crash in Las Vegas. His Corvette was traveling over 150 miles per hour before slamming into the back of another vehicle. The crash killed 23-year-old Tina Tintor and her dog. Police found Ruggs was under the influence, more than twice the legal limit. He was immediately released by the Raiders and charged with DUI resulting in death. In 2023, he pled guilty and was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison. Ruggs' career ended at 22 years old, not because of injury or performance or bad luck. It ended because of one devastating decision. Johnny Manziel. Coming out of Texas A&M, Johnny Manziel was one of the most electrifying quarterbacks college football had ever seen. In 2012, he became the first freshman in history to win the Heisman Trophy. He beat Alabama on the road, piled up over 5,000 total yards in a season, and played with a mix of improvisation, swagger, and raw talent that made him a national sensation. Johnny Football was bigger than the game. The Browns drafted him 22nd overall in 2014, hoping he could be their long-awaited franchise quarterback. But from the moment he arrived in Cleveland, everything felt off. Manziel struggled to adjust to the NFL. He didn't prepare like a professional, rarely studied film, and often skipped team commitments. Reports surfaced of him partying during the week, showing up late to meetings, and missing treatment sessions. When he did play, he looked overwhelmed. His backyard style didn't translate, and he couldn't keep up with NFL defenses. Off the field, it got worse. He was fined, benched, lied about his behavior to coaches, and checked into rehab. In 2016, after just 2 seasons, the Browns released him. He never played another NFL down. Manziel later admitted that he never watched tape in Cleveland and was battling personal demons throughout his brief career. He attempted comebacks in the CFL and other leagues, but none stuck. The fall was complete. Ray Rice. Ray Rice was once the face of the Baltimore Ravens offense. From 2009 to 2012, he was one of the most consistent and productive running backs in the NFL. He rushed for over 1,000 yards in 4 straight seasons, caught passes out of the backfield like a wide receiver, and helped Baltimore win a Super Bowl in 2012. He was a 3-time Pro Bowler, a team leader, and a central figure in one of the league's most respected organizations. Then came the incident that ended everything. In February 2014, Rice and his then-fiancée Jenna Palmer were involved in an altercation inside an Atlantic City elevator. At first, the league suspended him just 2 games, and the Ravens publicly stood by him. But months later, TMZ released the full elevator footage, showing Rice punching Palmer in the face and knocking her unconscious. The response was swift. The Ravens released him within hours. The NFL suspended him indefinitely. Teams around the league distanced themselves, and just like that, Ray Rice's career was over. He was only 27 years old, had just signed a long-term contract, and was coming off multiple 1,000-yard seasons. But no team ever signed him again. Trent Richardson. Coming out of Alabama, Trent Richardson was viewed as a can't-miss prospect. The Browns selected him 3rd overall in the 2012 NFL Draft, the highest pick used on a running back in over a decade. At 5 feet 9 inches, 230 pounds, Richardson had the build of a power back, but moved with surprising agility and burst. He was dominant in college, breaking tackles, running through SEC defenses, and drawing comparisons to Adrian Peterson. His rookie season gave Cleveland some hope. He rushed for 950 yards and 11 total touchdowns, despite playing through rib injuries and behind a struggling offensive line. It wasn't efficient, but it looked like the foundation for something better. Then the collapse began. Just 2 games into his second season, the Browns traded him to the Colts for a first-round pick. Indianapolis thought they were adding a workhorse, but Richardson struggled immediately. He looked slow, indecisive, and frequently missed holes. He averaged just 3.1 yards per carry over 2 seasons, and eventually lost his starting job. After being released in 2015, he bounced around briefly with the Raiders and Ravens, but never played another NFL snap. He later played in the AAF, but the explosiveness and vision never returned. By the time he turned 26, his NFL career was finished. From top 3 pick to out of the league in 3 years. Aldon Smith. At 22 years old, Aldon Smith looked like the most terrifying young pass rusher in football. Drafted 7th overall by the 49ers in 2011, he racked up 14 sacks as a rookie, despite not starting a single game. In his second year, he exploded for 19.5 sacks, setting a franchise record and earning first-team All-Pro honors. With speed, strength, and a relentless motor, Smith looked like he was on a Hall of Fame trajectory. But off the field, everything unraveled. In 2013, he was arrested for DUI just hours after a team practice and voluntarily entered rehab during the season. That same year, he was charged with multiple felony gun counts after an incident at his house. The NFL suspended him in 2014 for violating its personal conduct policy. Then, just as he returned to the field, he was arrested again. Another DUI, another suspension. The 49ers finally cut ties in 2015. He signed with the Raiders, but played just 9 games before another off-field incident led to a 1-year suspension. That ban was extended indefinitely. By 2016, he was completely out of the league. Smith attempted a comeback in 2020 with the Dallas Cowboys after nearly 5 years away. He showed flashes of his old self, but couldn't hold on to a roster spot. He was arrested again in 2021 for second-degree battery and later charged with DUI causing injury. Le'Veon Bell. At his peak, Le'Veon Bell was the most complete running back in football. With the Pittsburgh Steelers, he redefined the position. He had the patience to wait behind blocks, the vision to see every gap, and the hands of a wide receiver. From 2014 to 2017, Bell averaged nearly 130 scrimmage yards per game, the highest rate in NFL history. He was a 2-time All-Pro, a 3-time Pro Bowler, and the heartbeat of a Steelers offense that already featured Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown. But it all started to fall apart in 2018. Bell was unhappy with his contract situation and chose to sit out the entire season, betting that he'd land a massive payday in free agency. The Steelers moved on without him, and he never played another snap for Pittsburgh. In 2019, he signed a 4-year deal with the New York Jets worth $52.5 million. It was supposed to reset the market for running backs. Instead, it became the beginning of the end. Under Adam Gase, Bell looked like a shell of himself. The offensive line was poor, the scheme didn't fit, and his explosiveness never came back. He rushed for just 789 yards and scored 4 total touchdowns. Less than 2 seasons into the contract, the Jets released him. After that, he bounced from team to team. Kansas City, Baltimore, Tampa Bay, never finding a role. He even briefly shifted focus to boxing. Cecil Collins. Cecil Collins had all the talent in the world, and none of the discipline to go with it. Nicknamed the Diesel for his punishing running style, Collins was a five-star recruit and one of the most coveted high school players in the country. He began his college career at LSU, and in just 2 games, he rushed for over 400 yards, looking like a future first-round pick. But off the field, things spiraled quickly. He was suspended multiple times at LSU for violating team rules and eventually dismissed after being charged with breaking into a woman's apartment while she slept. He transferred to McNeese State, but never played a down before entering the NFL draft. Despite the red flags, the Miami Dolphins took a chance on him in the 5th round in 1999. He showed flashes of potential early in his rookie season, rushing for 39 yards on his first carry, and looked like a potential breakout player in a crowded backfield. Then, just a few weeks into the season, it happened again. Collins was arrested and charged with burglary after breaking into another woman's apartment, reportedly to watch her sleep. He was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in prison. His NFL career lasted just 8 games. Aaron Hernandez. Aaron Hernandez was one of the most gifted young tight ends in the NFL, and his fall remains one of the darkest stories in league history. Drafted in the 4th round by the New England Patriots in 2010, Hernandez quickly became a star. Paired with Rob Gronkowski, he helped revolutionize the tight end position, giving the Patriots a 2-headed mismatch nightmare. He caught 79 passes for 910 yards and 7 touchdowns in 2011, helped lead New England to a Super Bowl appearance, and signed a $40 million contract extension before the start of the 2012 season. On the field, he was explosive. Off the field, he was living a double life. In June 2013, Hernandez was arrested for the murder of Odin Lloyd, a semi-pro football player who was dating his fiance's sister. The Patriots released him that same day. Over the next several months, details emerged that connected Hernandez to a string of violent incidents dating back to his college years. In 2015, he was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He would later be acquitted in a separate double homicide trial, but was found dead in his prison cell just days later in 2017. His death was ruled a suicide. Dwayne Goodrich. Dwayne Goodrich was a first-round pick in the 2000 NFL Draft, selected 49th overall by the Dallas Cowboys. A standout cornerback at the University of Tennessee, he was known for his speed, instincts, and playmaking, including a pick 6 in the national championship game. The Cowboys saw him as the next leader in their secondary, but injuries and inconsistency stalled his development early. He played sparingly in his first 2 seasons, never locking down a starting role. Still, at just 24 years old, Goodrich had time to grow into the player Dallas hoped he'd become. That time ran out in January 2003. While speeding on a Dallas highway, Goodrich struck and killed 2 Good Samaritans who had stopped to help a stranded motorist. He fled the scene and later turned himself in. Investigators said he was driving over 100 miles per hour. He was convicted of criminally negligent homicide and sentenced to 12.5 years in prison. He never played in the NFL again. C.J. Spillman. C.J. Spillman carved out a role as a reliable special teams player in the NFL. He wasn't a household name, but he earned respect in locker rooms across the league for his toughness, hustle, and consistency in the game's least glamorous phase. After going undrafted in 2009, he worked his way onto multiple rosters, starting with San Diego, then finding his stride with the San Francisco 49ers. There, he played in a Super Bowl and was one of the team's core special teamers. Coaches praised his effort. He wasn't a star, but he was a pro. Then came the crime that ended everything. In September 2014, while with the Dallas Cowboys, Spillman was accused of sexual assault by a woman who said he attacked her in the team hotel. He played the rest of that season while under investigation, a decision that drew criticism at the time. In 2016, he was convicted of sexual assault and sentenced to 5 years in prison. His NFL career never resumed. Plaxico Burress. Plaxico Burress had one of the most iconic moments in Super Bowl history. In February 2008, with 35 seconds left in the 4th quarter, he caught the game-winning touchdown to lift the New York Giants over the undefeated New England Patriots. It was the highlight of a career that included nearly 8,000 receiving yards, a reputation as a red zone nightmare, and a physical style few cornerbacks could handle. But less than a year after that Super Bowl moment, his career took a dramatic turn. In November 2008, Burris was at a Manhattan nightclub when a handgun he was carrying slipped down his leg and accidentally discharged, shooting himself in the thigh. The wound was minor, but the consequences weren't. The gun was unlicensed in New York, which has some of the strictest firearm laws in the country. Burris was charged with criminal possession of a weapon and ultimately sentenced to 2 years in prison. The Giants released him while he was incarcerated, and he missed the entire 2009 and 2010 seasons. He returned briefly with the Jets and later the Steelers, but he was never the same. His speed, rhythm, and role all faded. From Super Bowl hero to inmate within a year. Percy Harvin. At his best, Percy Harvin was one of the most electric playmakers in the NFL. Drafted by the Minnesota Vikings in 2009, he could do everything: line up in the slot, return kicks, take handoffs, and break a game open on any play. In his rookie season, he won Offensive Rookie of the Year and returned 2 kicks for touchdowns. He was nearly impossible to scheme for because he didn't have a set position, just a blur of motion and explosion. In 2012, he was on pace for an MVP-level season before an ankle injury cut it short. The following year, he was traded to the Seattle Seahawks, where his legend only grew and unraveled at the same time. He missed nearly the entire 2013 regular season, recovering from hip surgery, but returned in the Super Bowl and delivered one of the most memorable moments of the game, a 87-yard kickoff return touchdown to open the second half against the Broncos. But behind the scenes, Harvin's career was crumbling. He fought with teammates, reportedly punched Golden Tate before the Super Bowl, and clashed with coaches in Seattle. He was traded again in 2014 to the Jets, where his role diminished, and then briefly signed with the Bills before retiring in 2016 due to lingering injuries and migraines that had plagued him since college. Percy Harvin was a generational talent, but his career never found stability. Trevone Boykin was one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in college football during his time at TCU. He shattered school records, finished 4th in Heisman voting in 2014, and was known for his ability to improvise and create magic outside the pocket. By his senior year, he was one of the most exciting dual-threat QBs in the country. Despite all that, he went undrafted in 2016. The Seattle Seahawks signed him as a backup to Russell Wilson, and he made the roster as a rookie. In limited preseason and spot duty, Boykin showed flashes of the same playmaking ability that made him a college star. He was young, athletic, and learning behind a franchise quarterback. The opportunity was there. Then came the off-field trouble. Boykin had multiple arrests, including one in college just days before his bowl game. In the NFL, the issues escalated. He was arrested for marijuana possession, involved in a car crash that injured 8 people, and accused of domestic violence in separate incidents. In 2018, he was released by the Seahawks after his girlfriend accused him of brutally assaulting her, an allegation that led to charges of aggravated assault causing serious bodily injury. In 2019, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison after pleading guilty. Trevone Boykin's NFL career lasted just 1 season. Martavis Bryant had all the tools to be a star wide receiver in the NFL. At 6 feet 4 inches with blazing speed, he was a matchup nightmare from the moment he stepped on the field. Drafted by the Steelers in the 4th round in 2014, he quickly made an impact, averaging over 20 yards per catch as a rookie and scoring 8 touchdowns in just 10 games. He followed that up with another strong year in 2015, including a 100-yard game in the playoffs against Denver. He was raw but dangerous. Pittsburgh had Antonio Brown commanding attention, and Bryant was the perfect vertical complement, capable of turning every deep shot into 6 points. But then came the suspensions. In 2016, Bryant was suspended for the entire season for multiple violations of the NFL's substance abuse policy. He returned in 2017, but never regained the trust of the coaching staff. That offseason, the Steelers traded him to the Raiders. In Oakland, it didn't last long. He struggled with injuries, faced another suspension, and was eventually released. After multiple failed reinstatement attempts, he bounced to the CFL, the XFL, and even a short-lived contract with the Dallas Cowboys in 2023, but he never played another NFL snap. Jamarcus Russell Jamarcus Russell was the definition of a high-risk, high-reward draft pick, and he became one of the most infamous busts in NFL history. The Raiders took him first overall in 2007 after he lit up the Sugar Bowl with a cannon arm and a 6'6", 260-pound frame that scouts couldn't stop talking about. He had every physical tool imaginable. His pro day throws reportedly wowed coaches and executives. Al Davis believed he had found the next great Raiders quarterback, but once he got to the league, it unraveled fast. Russell held out of training camp his rookie year before signing a $61 million contract with over $30 million guaranteed. When he finally reported, he was behind on the playbook, out of shape, and struggled with basic reads. Over 3 seasons, he started 25 games and threw just 18 touchdowns with 23 interceptions. Coaches questioned his work ethic. Teammates quietly lost confidence. He missed meetings, showed little leadership, and was accused of falling asleep during film sessions. After the 2009 season, the Raiders released him. Things spiraled from there. Russell never played another NFL snap. He was arrested for possession of codeine without a prescription in 2010 and repeatedly attempted to work his way back into the league, even offering to play for free in later interviews. But the opportunities never came. Peyton Hillis, 2010. In 2010, Peyton Hillis became the most unlikely star in the NFL. He rushed for 1,177 yards, added over 450 receiving yards, and scored 13 total touchdowns for the Cleveland Browns. At 6'2" and 250 pounds, Hillis wasn't flashy. He ran angry, lowered his shoulder, and fought for every yard. Originally drafted as a fullback, he started his career buried on Denver's depth chart. When he was traded to Cleveland, the move barely registered, but injuries gave him a shot, and he made the most of it. He stiff-armed defenders, carried piles forward, and even hurdled a few would-be tacklers. He had big games against top defenses, including 184 yards against the Patriots and 144 against the Ravens. His breakout was so popular that fans voted him onto the cover of Madden 12. Then it all faded. Injuries and contract tension followed. His production dropped in 2011, and he bounced around teams before quietly leaving the league a few years later. Barry Foster, 1992. In 1992, Barry Foster put together one of the best rushing seasons in Steelers history. He ran for 1,690 yards and 11 touchdowns, carrying a Pittsburgh offense that was transitioning under new head coach Bill Cowher. He led the AFC in rushing and made the Pro Bowl. For a moment, it looked like he was about to become the next great Steelers back. Foster was built low to the ground with a compact, punishing running style. He wore defenses down and controlled games with volume. That season, he had 12 100-yard rushing performances and was the heartbeat of a team that finished 11-5. But the window didn't last. Injuries started catching up immediately. He missed 5 games in 1993 and never looked the same. By 1994, he had lost his starting job. He was traded to Carolina in 1995, but he retired before ever playing a snap. He finished his career with just over 3,900 rushing yards. Nearly half came in one magical season. Robert Griffin III, 2012. In 2012, Robert Griffin III looked like the future of the NFL. As a rookie with Washington, he threw for 3,200 yards, ran for another 815, and totaled 27 touchdowns with just 5 interceptions. He led the league in passer rating, brought Washington to a division title, and won Offensive Rookie of the Year. He was explosive, smart, and fearless. His deep ball was accurate, his speed stretched defenses, and his composure under pressure was rare for a first-year quarterback. The offense was built around him, and it worked. Every week felt like a highlight reel, but the season ended with a torn ACL in the playoffs. He came back in 2013, but he wasn't the same. The burst was gone, and the confidence seemed to follow. He struggled through the next 2 seasons before losing the starting job and eventually moving into backup roles. Tim Tebow, 2011. In 2011, Tim Tebow took over the Denver Broncos and turned chaos into wins. He started the season as the backup, but was named the starter after a 1-4 start. From that point on, Denver went 7-4 with Tebow under center. He threw just 12 touchdowns all season and completed less than half of his passes, but he kept finding ways to win, often in the final minutes. It wasn't clean football. The offense would stall for 3 quarters, then suddenly click in the fourth. Tebow scrambled, improvised, and turned broken plays into game winners. He led multiple comeback drives, including a stretch where the Broncos won 6 straight games. Then came the playoffs. In the wild card round against Pittsburgh, Tebow threw for 316 yards and hit Demaryius Thomas for an 80-yard touchdown. On the first play of overtime, it was the most iconic moment of his career, and it turned out to be the end of it. Denver signed Peyton Manning the following offseason, and Tebow was traded to the Jets. He never started another NFL game. Derek Anderson, 2007. In 2007, Derek Anderson became the surprise leader of one of the NFL's most explosive offenses. Taking over as Cleveland's starting quarterback in Week 2, he threw for 3,787 yards and 29 touchdowns, both top 10 in the league that season. He led the Browns to a 10-6 record, their best finish in over a decade, and earned a Pro Bowl selection. Anderson had a huge arm and took advantage of it. He hit Braylon Edwards for deep shots, fed Kellen Winslow over the middle, and wasn't afraid to take risks. The Browns scored 30 or more points 6 times, and fans finally had hope that the franchise had found its guy. But the following year, everything unraveled. He struggled with accuracy and decision-making in 2008 and was eventually benched. Injuries followed. Over the next 9 seasons, he never started more than 5 games in a year. He settled into a backup role and quietly exited the league in 2018. Steve Slayton, 2008. In 2008, Steve Slayton looked like the NFL's next breakout running back. As a rookie with the Houston Texans, he rushed for 1,282 yards, scored 10 total touchdowns, and added nearly 400 receiving yards. He finished 6th in the league in rushing and gave Houston its first legitimate backfield star since the franchise was founded. Slayton was undersized but explosive. He had breakaway speed, quick feet, and the ability to make defenders miss in space. He had 5 100-yard rushing games, including a 156-yard performance in Week 16 against the Raiders that helped Houston finish 8-8. But after his rookie year, he never found that gear again. He struggled with fumbles in 2009 and lost his starting job. Injuries slowed him down, and by 2011, he was out of the league. He attempted a brief comeback in the CFL, but it never materialized into another run. Gary Barnidge, 2015. In 2015, Gary Barnidge became the most unexpected breakout tight end in the NFL. At 30 years old, in his 8th season, he posted 79 catches for 1,043 yards and 9 touchdowns with the Cleveland Browns. Before that year, he had never topped 300 yards in a season. Then suddenly, he was one of the league's most productive pass catchers. Barnidge had great size, strong hands, and found soft spots in coverage. No matter who the quarterback was, Josh McCown, Johnny Manziel, or Austin Davis, Barnidge produced. He was consistent, reliable, and became the lone bright spot in a Browns offense that struggled all year. The season earned him a Pro Bowl selection and a contract extension. But just as quickly as it started, it was over. In 2016, his numbers dropped significantly. He was released the following offseason and never played another NFL snap. Ernie Sims, 2006. In 2006, Ernie Sims looked like the future of the Detroit Lions defense. Drafted 9th overall out of Florida State, Sims made an immediate impact as a rookie. He started all 16 games, recorded 124 total tackles, and flew all over the field with elite sideline-to-sideline speed. At just 21 years old, he was already calling plays for the defense and rarely came off the field. He followed that with another 100-tackle season in 2007 and again in 2008. He was undersized for a linebacker but made up for it with athleticism, effort, and instinct. For a few seasons, he was one of the most productive young defenders in the league. But things unraveled quickly. Injuries began to pile up, and his coverage struggles became harder to hide. By 2009, his role had started to shrink. The Lions traded him to Philadelphia in 2010, and after that, he bounced between 4 teams in 4 years. He played 8 seasons in total, but only his rookie year carried that burst of promise, when it looked like Ernie Sims might become a star. Alfred Morris, 2012. In 2012, Alfred Morris went from unknown 6th-round pick to one of the NFL's leading rushers. As a rookie in Washington, Morris ran for 1,613 yards and 13 touchdowns, the second most rushing yards in the league that year, behind only Adrian Peterson. He helped power a dominant zone read offense alongside Robert Griffin III, and the team finished 10-6 with a division title. Morris ran with vision, patience, and quiet power. He didn't rely on speed or flash. He found the cutback lanes, stayed low, and punished tacklers. And he was dependable. He fumbled just once all season. The performance was even more surprising considering his background. He came from Florida Atlantic, didn't receive much national attention, and made the roster out of camp as the third-string back. Morris stayed productive for a few more seasons, including back-to-back 1,000-yard years in 2013 and 2014, but he never matched his rookie numbers. As the offense shifted and RG3 declined, Morris's role shrank. He became a rotational back and spent his later years as a spot starter in Dallas and San Francisco. His 2012 season came out of nowhere, and though he had a solid career, nothing ever quite matched that incredible debut. Rex Grossman, 2006. In 2006, Rex Grossman started every game for a Chicago Bears team that went 13-3 and reached the Super Bowl. It was the only full season he ever played as a starter. He threw for over 3,000 yards and 23 touchdowns, leading a team that relied heavily on its defense and special teams. Grossman was streaky, capable of explosive quarters and baffling mistakes. But for much of that year, he held it together just enough. The Bears didn't ask him to carry the offense. With Devin Hester flipping field position and Brian Urlacher anchoring a dominant defense, Grossman's job was to keep the train on the tracks. And for most of the regular season, he did. But the inconsistency never went away. He had multiple games with a passer rating under 30 and turnovers at the worst times. In the Super Bowl against the Colts, he threw 2 interceptions, including a pick 6 that helped seal the loss. Grossman remained in the league as a backup for several more years, but 2006 was his only real moment in the spotlight. Case Keenum, 2017. In 2017, Case Keenum stepped in as the Minnesota Vikings backup and led them on a run that nearly reached the Super Bowl. After injuries sidelined Sam Bradford, Keenum took over and delivered the best season of his career. He threw for 3,547 yards, 22 touchdowns, and just 7 interceptions. More importantly, he went 11-3 as a starter and helped the Vikings finish 13-3. Keenum was efficient, decisive, and made big throws when it mattered. He developed instant chemistry with Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, running Pat Shurmur's offense with poise and precision. His defining moment came in the divisional round against the Saints. With 10 seconds left and trailing by 1, Keenum launched a sideline throw to Diggs, who turned upfield and scored in what became known as the Minneapolis Miracle. It was one of the most iconic plays in NFL playoff history, but the run ended a week later in the NFC Championship, when the Vikings were blown out by the Eagles. Despite his breakout, Minnesota let him walk in free agency. He signed with Denver the following year, but couldn't replicate the magic. He bounced around the league in backup roles, never returning to that 2017 form. Tommy Maddox, 2002. In 2002, Tommy Maddox completed one of the most unexpected comebacks in NFL history. Originally drafted in the first round by the Broncos in 1992, Maddox bounced around the league before falling out entirely. He spent years in the Arena League and eventually became MVP of the short-lived XFL. A decade after entering the league, he found himself back in Pittsburgh as a backup. But when Cordell Stewart struggled early in the 2002 season, Maddox stepped in and ignited the offense. He threw for 2,836 yards and 20 touchdowns in 11 starts, led Pittsburgh to a 7-3-1 record during that span, and took them to the playoffs. He was fearless in the pocket, threw a great deep ball, and brought energy to a team that desperately needed a spark. His comeback story caught national attention, and he was named the NFL Comeback Player of the Year. But the magic didn't last. He returned as the starter in 2003, but turnovers and injuries slowed him down. The Steelers went 6-10, and the following year, he was replaced by a rookie named Ben Roethlisberger. That was the end of Maddox's run. Sidney Rice, 2009. In 2009, Sidney Rice emerged as one of the most dangerous deep threats in the NFL. That year, he posted 1,312 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns on 83 catches, nearly tripling his previous career highs. He became Brett Favre's go-to target in Minnesota's vertical passing attack, routinely winning contested catches and stretching the field with size and body control. Rice had all the tools. He was 6'4", had strong hands, and tracked the deep ball like a veteran. With Favre slinging it and the Vikings offense clicking, Rice broke out as a Pro Bowl receiver and helped lead Minnesota to a 12-4 record and an NFC Championship game appearance. But the momentum didn't carry. The next season, he delayed hip surgery and missed most of the year. Injuries lingered from that point forward. He signed a big deal with Seattle in 2011, but never returned to the same level. He had flashes, but concussions and knee issues cut his career short. He retired after just 6 seasons. Jamir Miller, 2001. In 2001, Jamir Miller played like one of the best defenders in football. The Browns linebacker posted 13 sacks, 101 tackles, and 4 forced fumbles that year, earning Pro Bowl and All-Pro honors. It was the first time a Cleveland defender had made the Pro Bowl since the team returned to the league in 1999, and Miller was the clear centerpiece of a rebuilding defense. Originally drafted 10th overall by the Cardinals in 1994, Miller spent years as a solid but under-the-radar linebacker. In Cleveland, he finally put it all together. He was dominant off the edge, versatile in coverage, and a vocal leader on a young roster. But the breakthrough year ended up being his last. During the 2002 preseason, Miller ruptured his Achilles. The injury was severe enough that he never played another snap in the NFL. For one season, Jamir Miller reached his full potential and looked like a player who could anchor a defense for years. Brandon Lloyd, 2010. In 2010, Brandon Lloyd led the NFL in receiving yards with 1,448 after 7 seasons of being mostly a journeyman. At 29 years old, playing for his 4th team, Lloyd exploded onto the scene with the Denver Broncos. He averaged nearly 19 yards per catch and hauled in 11 touchdowns, forming a lethal connection with quarterback Kyle Orton in Josh McDaniels' aggressive passing offense. Lloyd's game was built on acrobatic catches and body control. He made highlight reels with toe taps on the sideline, one-handed grabs in traffic, and circus catches over defenders. After years of flashes, he finally had a season where everything clicked. But it didn't last. He followed up with a solid 2011 campaign, then bounced around between the Rams, Patriots, and 49ers. He never came close to his 2010 numbers again, and quietly retired a few years later. Brandon Lloyd's career spanned over a decade, but the year everyone remembers is 2010. Charles White, 1987. In 1987, Charles White led the NFL in rushing with 1,374 yards and 11 touchdowns, nearly matching his total yardage from the previous 5 seasons combined. It was a stunning comeback. A former Heisman Trophy winner from USC, White had struggled early in his pro career with injuries, off-field issues, and inconsistency. After 5 disappointing seasons with the Browns, he landed in Los Angeles with the Rams and reunited with his college coach, John Robinson. That year, everything changed. White ran with urgency, vision, and toughness. He carried the ball 324 times, more than any other back in the league, and helped keep the Rams competitive during a strike-shortened season that included replacement players. He was named NFL Comeback Player of the Year and earned the only Pro Bowl nod of his career, but the success didn't carry forward. In 1988, his production dropped sharply. By 1989, he was out of the league. Greg Cook, 1969. In 1969, Greg Cook looked like a future superstar at quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals. As a rookie, he threw for 1,854 yards and 15 touchdowns in just 11 games, at a time when passing numbers were modest and rookie QBs rarely produced. He had size, poise, deep ball accuracy, and a calm command of the offense. Head coach Paul Brown called him the best quarterback prospect he had ever seen. But early in the season, Cook suffered a serious shoulder injury. He continued to play through it, unknowingly tearing his rotator cuff. There was no surgical repair for the injury at the time, and as the pain worsened, his career began slipping away before it really started. He attempted a brief comeback in 1973, but never threw another regular season pass. His rookie year ended up being his only one. Michael Clayton, 2004. In 2004, Michael Clayton put together one of the best rookie seasons by a wide receiver in NFL history. Drafted 15th overall by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he caught 80 passes for 1,193 yards and 7 touchdowns. He was physical, tough after the catch, and reliable in traffic. On a team that lacked offensive consistency, Clayton was a bright spot and quickly became the go-to target. He looked like a future star, a strong route runner with size and balance, who could anchor the position for years. But after that rookie year, his production collapsed. Injuries, changes at quarterback, and a revolving door at offensive coordinator all played a part. He never scored more than 1 touchdown in any of his remaining 6 seasons. Despite getting opportunities, he never rediscovered the timing or confidence he showed in 2004. Michael Clayton stayed in the league through 2011, but his impact never matched that first season. Josh Norman, 2015. In 2015, Josh Norman became the most feared cornerback in the NFL. Playing in his 4th season with the Carolina Panthers, Norman shut down nearly every top receiver he faced. He had 4 interceptions, 2 defensive touchdowns, 18 passes deflected, and countless targets that never even got thrown. His impact didn't always show up in the box score. Quarterbacks simply avoided his side of the field. Norman set the tone for a Panthers defense that went 15-1 and reached the Super Bowl. He was physical at the line, smart in zone coverage, and confident enough to go head-to-head with anyone. That season earned him All-Pro honors and vaulted him into the national spotlight. After the season, Carolina rescinded his franchise tag, and Norman signed a massive deal with Washington. But he never reached that level again. He remained a solid starter for a few years, but the dominance faded. The consistency, the elite coverage, and the shutdown reputation never fully followed him. Josh Gordon, 2013. In 2013, Josh Gordon delivered one of the greatest seasons by a wide receiver, and he did it in just 14 games. He finished with 1,646 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns on 87 catches for the Cleveland Browns. He led the NFL in receiving yards despite missing the first 2 games due to suspension, and he became the first player in league history to record back-to-back 200-yard games in consecutive weeks. Gordon was nearly impossible to guard. He combined size, speed, body control, and effortless separation. He routinely turned short slants into breakaway touchdowns and went over the top of double coverage without flinching. But that season became both his peak and his pivot point. Gordon was suspended multiple times for violating the league's substance abuse policy. He missed the entire 2015 season, and over the next 8 years, he played just 45 total games. There were brief flashes in New England, Seattle, and Kansas City, but he never recaptured the dominance of 2013. David Johnson, 2016. In 2016, David Johnson looked like the future of the running back position. In just his second NFL season, Johnson totaled 2,118 yards from scrimmage and scored 20 touchdowns for the Arizona Cardinals. He rushed for 1,239 yards, caught 80 passes for 879 more, and became the first player in league history to gain over 100 scrimmage yards in each of his team's first 15 games. He was the total package. Johnson had power between the tackles, quick feet in space, and soft hands like a slot receiver. Arizona lined him up everywhere, in the backfield, out wide, in motion, and he made defenses pay at every level. But everything changed the following year. In week 1 of the 2017 season, Johnson dislocated his wrist and missed the rest of the year. He returned in 2018, but the explosiveness was gone. Injuries continued to pile up, and by 2020, he was part of a trade package to Houston. He never reached 1,000 yards again. Olandis Gary, 1999. In 1999, Olandis Gary became the latest unknown to explode in Denver's backfield. A 6th-round rookie from Georgia, Gary wasn't expected to see the field. But when Terrell Davis went down with a knee injury early in the season, Gary stepped in and looked like a seasoned veteran. He rushed for 1,159 yards and 7 touchdowns in just 12 starts, averaging 4.2 yards per carry. He was decisive, tough, and ran perfectly behind Denver's zone blocking scheme. Week after week, he posted 100-yard games, helping the Broncos stay competitive, despite losing their MVP running back and retiring quarterback John Elway. But the run didn't last. Gary tore his ACL in 2000 and was never the same. He stayed in the league for a few more seasons, but never cracked 400 rushing yards again. Denver's system continued to produce backs, but Gary's breakout year remained a one-time flash. Don Majkowski, 1989. In 1989, Don Majkowski led the NFL in passing yards and gave Green Bay its first real hope at quarterback since the Lombardi era. That season, he threw for 4,318 yards and 27 touchdowns, leading the Packers to a 10-6 record and coming within one game of the playoffs. He earned a Pro Bowl nod and finished second in MVP voting, all while playing with a flair that earned him the nickname the Magic Man. Majkowski was clutch. He led the league in fourth-quarter comebacks, including a dramatic Week 9 win over the Bears that ended a string of losses to Chicago and turned him into a folk hero in Wisconsin. But that year was the peak. He held out the following offseason, then battled injuries and inconsistency. In 1992, he was replaced mid-game by a young Brett Favre and never started another game for the Packers. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Bo Jackson. In 1986, the Buccaneers held the first overall pick, and they used it on Bo Jackson, the most electrifying athlete in the country. Fresh off a Heisman Trophy at Auburn, Jackson had the size of a power back and the speed of a sprinter. Scouts believed he was a once-in-a-generation talent who could transform a franchise overnight. For Tampa Bay, desperate to escape years of losing, it seemed like the perfect pick. But from the start, the relationship was broken. Before the draft, the Buccaneers flew Jackson on a private jet to visit the team. That trip, arranged without NCAA clearance, cost him his final season of college baseball eligibility. To Jackson, it felt like sabotage. He believed Tampa had intentionally misled him, and he made it clear he would never play it down for them. The Buccaneers ignored his warnings and drafted him anyway, convinced that no athlete would really walk away from being the #1 pick in the NFL draft. But Bo Jackson was different. Instead of signing, he chose baseball, joining the Kansas City Royals and showing the world he could be a star in another sport. The Raiders later took a flyer on him in the 7th round of the 1987 draft, and Jackson became a two-sport phenomenon, breaking off legendary runs in the NFL while still hitting home runs in Major League Baseball. The Buccaneers, meanwhile, were left with nothing to show for their top pick. It remains one of the most infamous draft blunders in league history. Tampa Bay used the first overall pick on a player who never wore their uniform. Dallas Cowboys, David LaFleur. In the 1997 NFL Draft, the Dallas Cowboys were looking to reload their dynasty roster. They had won 3 Super Bowls in the 1990s, but their championship window was starting to close. With the 22nd overall pick, they selected LSU tight end David LaFleur, a big-bodied target who they believed could become the next Jay Novacek and keep Troy Aikman's offense humming. At 6 feet 7 inches and nearly 270 pounds, LaFleur had the frame to dominate. Dallas envisioned him as a red zone nightmare and a reliable safety valve for Aikman, but the production never came. Injuries limited his development, and when he was healthy, he struggled to separate from defenders and establish himself as a consistent receiver. Over 4 seasons, his best year came in 1999, when he caught 35 passes for 322 yards and 7 touchdowns. Beyond that flash, he never topped 200 yards in another season. For a first-round pick on a team still loaded with talent, the lack of impact was glaring. The Cowboys had hoped LaFleur would be a cornerstone for their next era, but by 2001, he was out of football entirely. Dallas spent a premium pick on a player who never became more than a role piece. New England Patriots, Kenneth Sims. In 1982, the New England Patriots held the first overall pick and chose defensive lineman Kenneth Sims out of Texas. At the time, Sims was seen as a safe and dominant selection. He had been an All-American, won the Lombardi Award, and looks like the kind of player who could anchor a defensive line for the next decade. But the reality was far different. Sims battled injuries almost immediately, missing time with knee problems, and never staying on the field long enough to build momentum. When he was healthy, he failed to make the kind of impact expected from a top pick. Over 8 seasons in New England, he started just 74 games, finishing his career with only 17 sacks, a number many top pass rushers eclipse in a single great season. To make matters worse, questions about his conditioning and work ethic followed him throughout his time with the Patriots. For a team looking to build a foundation piece with the #1 pick, Sims became a symbol of wasted potential. By 1989, he was out of the league, and his name became permanently tied to one of the Patriots' darkest draft decisions. Atlanta Falcons, Andre Bruce. In 1988, the Atlanta Falcons owned the #1 overall pick and chose Auburn linebacker Andre Bruce. At the time, he was compared to Lawrence Taylor, a dominant do-it-all defender who could rush the passer, drop into coverage, and change the game on every snap. The Falcons believed they had drafted the cornerstone of their defense for the next decade, but Bruce never came close to those expectations. From the beginning, he struggled to find a true position. Atlanta moved him around the defense, hoping to unlock his potential, but he never excelled at any one role. As a pass rusher, he lacked the explosiveness to consistently beat tackles. As an inside linebacker, he didn't have the instincts to dominate in traffic. The comparisons to Taylor quickly vanished. Over 11 seasons in the NFL, Bruce managed just 32 sacks. He became a serviceable role player, but never the superstar the Falcons envisioned for a #1 pick expected to transform the franchise. His production was a massive disappointment. For Atlanta, the decision stung even more because the late 1980s were a period of struggle for the franchise. Drafting a generational defender could have changed their trajectory. Houston Texans, David Carr. In 2002, the Houston Texans were entering the NFL as an expansion franchise, and with the first overall pick in their inaugural draft, they selected quarterback David Carr out of Fresno State. He was big, athletic, had a strong arm, and was supposed to be the face of the franchise, the player who would carry the Texans from day one. But the situation he was thrown into was almost impossible. The Texans were building their roster from scratch, and the offensive line was one of the weakest in the league. In Carr's rookie season alone, he was sacked 76 times, an NFL record that still stands. He was hit so often that it stunted his development, as his mechanics broke down and his confidence was shaken. Instead of growing into the role, Carr spent most of his time running for his life. The Texans tried to surround him with talent, but the damage had already been done. Over 5 seasons in Houston, Carr threw 59 touchdowns against 65 interceptions, never led the team to a winning record, and was eventually released after 2006. He bounced around the league as a backup for several years, but never came close to being the star quarterback Houston thought they drafted. For a young franchise, whiffing on the #1 pick at quarterback was a crushing blow. Chicago Bears, Mitchell Trubisky. In 2017, the Chicago Bears made one of the boldest draft moves of the decade. They traded up to the 2nd overall pick to select quarterback Mitchell Trubisky out of North Carolina. It was a shocking decision, not only because Trubisky had started just 13 games in college, but because the Bears passed on other top prospects, including Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. The message was clear. Chicago believed Trubisky would be their long-awaited franchise quarterback. The reality was far different. As a rookie, Trubisky showed flashes of potential, but struggled with accuracy and decision-making. In 2018, under new head coach Matt Nagy, he had his best season, throwing for over 3,200 yards and helping lead the Bears to a 12-4 record. He made the Pro Bowl as an alternate, but even during that run, his limitations were obvious. The defense carried the team, and Trubisky's inconsistency kept the offense from reaching its ceiling. By 2019, the cracks widened. He regressed sharply, missing open throws, failing to read defenses, and looking overwhelmed in big moments. The Bears declined his 5th-year option in 2020, and by the end of the season, his time in Chicago was over. For the Bears, the pick was devastating. Passing on Mahomes, who developed into a generational superstar, turned the decision into one of the most infamous draft busts in NFL history. Buffalo Bills, Mike Williams. In 2002, the Buffalo Bills had the 4th overall pick and chose offensive tackle Mike Williams out of Texas. At the time, he was viewed as a can't-miss prospect, a massive, powerful lineman with the athleticism to anchor an offense for years. Buffalo believed he would be the cornerstone of their line and the protector of their quarterback for the next decade, but Williams never came close to reaching that level. He struggled with conditioning from the start, arriving to camp overweight and unable to consistently handle NFL speed off the edge. The technique that made him dominant in college didn't translate, and defenders regularly beat him with quickness and leverage. The Bills shifted him between tackle and guard, hoping to find a better fit, but he failed to excel at either position. Over 4 years in Buffalo, Williams never became the dominant lineman they envisioned. By 2006, he was released outright. He briefly resurfaced in Jacksonville as a backup, but was out of the league soon after. For the Bills, the pick was especially painful because of who came after. Players like Bryant McKinnie, Dwight Freeney, and Ed Reed all went later in the first round, leaving Buffalo stuck with one of the most disappointing top 5 picks of the decade, New York Giants, John Hicks. In 1974, the New York Giants used the 3rd overall pick on offensive lineman John Hicks out of Ohio State. Hicks had been a dominant force in college, winning both the Outland Trophy and the Lombardi Award, and was expected to become the anchor of New York's offensive line for years to come. But his NFL career never got off the ground. Hicks struggled to adjust to the speed and power of the pro game. While he had been overwhelming at Ohio State, he lacked the mobility and technique to handle NFL defenders consistently. Injuries compounded the problem, limiting his development and availability. After just 4 seasons, Hicks was out of the league entirely. He never made a Pro Bowl, never established himself as a long-term starter, and never came close to meeting the lofty expectations of a top 3 pick. For the Giants, the miss was part of a difficult stretch in the 1970s, where the franchise cycled through poor draft decisions and losing seasons. Hicks stands out as one of the most disappointing high draft picks in team history. Baltimore Ravens, Matt Elam. In 2013, the Baltimore Ravens were fresh off a Super Bowl win and looking to reload their defense after losing Ed Reed and Ray Lewis in the same offseason. With the final pick of the first round, they selected safety Matt Elam out of Florida. Elam had been a star in college. At Florida, he was a first-team All-American, known for his physicality, hard-hitting style, and ability to play in the box. Scouts praised his energy, toughness, and leadership, and the Ravens believed he could step into Reed's shoes and be their next defensive cornerstone. But from the moment he entered the league, things never clicked. At just 5 feet 10 inches and 208 pounds, Elam lacked the size to match up with bigger tight ends, and didn't have the range to cover deep like Reed. His aggressive play style often backfired, as he was caught out of position and gave up big plays. He started 15 games as a rookie, but his impact was minimal, recording just 77 tackles and 1 interception. In 2014, his struggles in coverage became more glaring, and by 2015, he tore his biceps in training camp, costing him the entire season. By the time he returned in 2016, he was buried on the depth chart. Off-field issues further derailed his career, including an arrest in 2017 that led the Ravens to cut ties completely. Elam never recorded more than 1 interception in a season, never became the defensive leader Baltimore envisioned, and was out of the NFL after just 4 years. Kansas City Chiefs, Todd Blackledge. In 1983, the Kansas City Chiefs had the 7th overall pick in what would later be remembered as the greatest quarterback draft class of all time. John Elway, Jim Kelly, and Dan Marino were all available that year, but the Chiefs used their pick on Todd Blackledge, the quarterback from Penn State. At the time, Blackledge looked like a smart choice. He had just led Penn State to a national championship, was viewed as a polished leader, and had the size and arm strength that NFL teams valued. Kansas City believed they were getting their franchise quarterback of the future, but Blackledge never lived up to the expectations. He started just 4 games as a rookie and immediately struggled with accuracy and turnovers. Over the next 5 seasons in Kansas City, he never secured the full-time starting job, stuck behind Bill Kenny and later Steve DeBerg. When he did play, the results were poor. He finished his Chiefs career with 26 touchdowns against 32 interceptions, never throwing for more than 1,700 yards in a season. In 1989, Blackledge signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he served as a backup for 2 years before retiring. By the time his career ended, The rest of the 1983 quarterback class had already begun carving out Hall of Fame legacies, while Blackledge was remembered as the outlier, the one first-round quarterback who never became a star. Arizona Cardinals, Andre Wadsworth. In 1998, the Arizona Cardinals held the 3rd overall pick and drafted Florida State defensive end Andre Wadsworth. At the time, he was considered one of the safest prospects in the draft. Wadsworth had been a dominant force in college, earning All-American honors and piling up 16 sacks his senior year. Many analysts believed he would be an instant Pro Bowl caliber pass rusher in the NFL, and early on it looked like they might be right. As a rookie, Wadsworth started all 16 games for Arizona, recorded 5 sacks, and played a major role in helping the Cardinals reach the playoffs for the first time in 50 years. He was powerful off the edge, quick off the snap, and seemed like a building block for a franchise desperate for defensive talent. But then came the injuries. Wadsworth began suffering from severe knee problems after his rookie season. Multiple surgeries followed, including microfracture procedures, which at the time often ended careers. His explosiveness disappeared, and by 2000, he was out of football entirely after just 3 seasons. Attempts to make comebacks in later years never panned out. For the Cardinals, it was a crushing blow. A top 3 pick who looked like a future star had his career derailed almost instantly. Instead of building their defense around Wadsworth for the next decade, Arizona was left searching for answers. Philadelphia Eagles, Leroy Keys. In 1969, the Philadelphia Eagles owned the 3rd overall pick and used it on Leroy Keys, a two-way star from Purdue. Keys was one of the most dynamic players in the country during his college career. He finished 3rd in the Heisman voting in 1968 and was a consensus All-American as both a running back and defensive back. With his versatility and athleticism, the Eagles believed he could become their next great offensive weapon. But Keys never lived up to the billing. The Eagles initially drafted him as a running back, expecting him to carry their offense. In his rookie year, he managed just 310 rushing yards on 124 carries, averaging a meager 2.5 yards per attempt. He struggled to adjust to the speed and physicality of NFL defenses, and he never showed the explosiveness that made him a college superstar. By his 2nd season, the Eagles tried him at wide receiver, hoping his hands and versatility might translate better there. It didn't. Keys caught only a handful of passes, and his role in the offense continued to shrink. After just 4 years in Philadelphia, he was traded to the Kansas City Chiefs, where he lasted 1 more season before being out of the league entirely. For the Eagles, the miss was especially painful because the very next pick after Keys was Hall of Fame defensive tackle Joe Green, who became the anchor of Pittsburgh's dynasty in the 1970s. Passing on Green to take Keys left Philadelphia with a wasted top 3 pick, while their in-state rivals built one of the greatest defenses of all time. Washington Commanders, Heath Shuler. In 1994, Washington was desperate for a franchise quarterback. With the 3rd overall pick, they selected Heath Shuler out of Tennessee, a big-armed passer who had been a Heisman finalist and was expected to quickly develop into the leader of their offense. Coming off a decorated college career, Shuler was supposed to be the long-term answer at a position Washington had struggled to solidify since the Joe Theismann era. But almost immediately, things went sideways. As a rookie, Shuler held out for a lengthy contract negotiation that kept him out of training camp. The missed time left him behind on learning the playbook, and when he finally got on the field, he looked overwhelmed. He threw 12 interceptions to just 10 touchdowns and completed only 45% of his passes. His mechanics broke down under pressure, and his confidence never recovered. By his 2nd season, he had lost the starting job to Gus Ferrata, a 7th-round pick who quickly outplayed him. The boos from Washington fans grew louder, and Shuler's reputation as a bust was sealed. In 1997, he was traded to the New Orleans Saints, but his struggles continued. A foot injury cut his career short after just 5 seasons. For Washington, the pick was a disaster. They invested a top 3 selection in a quarterback who never came close to meeting expectations. Instead of building around a franchise leader, the team was forced to start over yet again, prolonging their years of instability. Jacksonville Jaguars, Blaine Gabbert. In 2011, the Jacksonville Jaguars were searching for their franchise quarterback, and with the 10th overall pick, they drafted Blaine Gabbert out of Missouri. On draft night, the Jaguars traded up to get him, convinced his size, athleticism, and arm strength would make him the answer under center. At just 21 years old, Gabbert was supposed to be the long-term face of the franchise. But from the moment he stepped on the field, it was clear the transition wasn't going to be smooth. Gabbert was thrown into the starting lineup as a rookie behind a weak offensive line, and with very few playmakers around him. He looked overwhelmed, holding the ball too long and struggling with pocket presence. He took 40 sacks as a rookie, lost confidence, and finished with just 12 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, while completing under 51% of his passes. The problems never went away. Over his 3 seasons in Jacksonville, he went 5-22 as a starter, threw more interceptions than touchdowns, and often looked lost running the offense. His mechanics broke down under pressure, and instead of developing, he regressed. By 2014, the Jaguars had moved on, trading him to the San Francisco 49ers for a 6th-round pick. Gabbert has since carved out a lengthy career as a backup across the league, even winning a Super Bowl ring as Tom Brady's reserve in Tampa Bay. Cleveland Browns, Tim Couch. In 1999, the Cleveland Browns returned to the NFL as an expansion team, and with the very first pick in their franchise reboot, they drafted quarterback Tim Couch out of Kentucky. Couch was one of the most prolific passers in college football, setting SEC records with his accuracy and arm strength. For a franchise desperate for stability and identity, Couch was supposed to be the foundation, but the Browns were not ready to support a young quarterback. The expansion roster was thin, the offensive line was among the worst in football, and Couch was thrown into the fire immediately. As a rookie, he was sacked 56 times, hit countless more, and forced into bad habits. While he showed flashes of toughness and leadership, the constant punishment stunted his development. By 2002, Couch briefly led the Browns to a playoff berth, but even that season highlighted the issues. He threw 18 interceptions to just 18 touchdowns and missed the playoff game with an injury. Durability became a recurring theme. Couch broke his leg in 2000, suffered shoulder problems later, and never played a full 16-game season. After 5 years in Cleveland, he finished with 64 touchdowns against 67 interceptions, and the team released him in 2004. Attempts at comebacks with Green Bay and Jacksonville never stuck, and his career was effectively over at 27 years old. Carolina Panthers, Ray Caruth. In 1997, the Carolina Panthers used the 27th overall pick on wide receiver Ray Caruth out of Colorado. At the time, Caruth was seen as one of the most polished receivers in the draft. He had great hands, crisp routes, and explosive speed. Carolina believed they were adding a future star to an already promising young franchise that had just reached the NFC Championship in only its 2nd season. On the field, Caruth started strong. As a rookie, he caught 44 passes for 545 yards and 4 touchdowns, earning all rookie honors and validating the Panthers' investment. But injuries and off-field issues quickly derailed his career. He missed most of the 1998 season with a broken foot, and in 1999, his production dipped again. Then came one of the darkest moments in NFL history. In November 1999, Caruth was arrested and later convicted in connection with the murder of his pregnant girlfriend, Shericka Adams. The crime shocked the sports world and ended Caruth's career immediately. He was sentenced to prison in 2001, serving nearly 2 decades before his release in 2018. For the Panthers, the pick became a nightmare scenario. A first-round receiver who once showed real promise became infamous for one of the most disturbing off-field tragedies the league has ever seen. San Francisco 49ers, Trey Lance. In 2021, the San Francisco 49ers made one of the boldest moves in modern draft history. They traded 3 first-round picks and a 3rd-rounder to move up to the 3rd overall pick, selecting quarterback Trey Lance out of North Dakota State. Lance was raw, but the upside was tantalizing. At 6 feet 4 inches with a rocket arm, plus elite mobility and intelligence, he was billed as the perfect modern quarterback who could thrive in Kyle Shanahan's system. The 49ers envisioned him as the long-term successor to Jimmy Garoppolo, and the missing piece that could turn a talented roster into a dynasty. But things never went according to plan. Lance entered the league with only 17 starts at the FCS level, and that lack of experience showed. As a rookie, he played sparingly behind Garoppolo, starting just 2 games and flashing inconsistency. In 2022, when the 49ers finally handed him the reins, disaster struck. Lance suffered a season-ending ankle injury in Week 2. By the time he returned in 2023, he had barely played in 2 years. Meanwhile, the 49ers found success elsewhere. Garoppolo held the team steady, and then Brock Purdy, the last pick in the 2022 draft, became an unlikely breakout star. With Purdy entrenched as the starter, Lance's opportunity evaporated. In August 2023, San Francisco officially gave up, trading him to the Dallas Cowboys for a 4th-round pick. Tennessee Titans, Isaiah Wilson. In 2020, the Tennessee Titans used the 29th overall pick on offensive tackle Isaiah Wilson out of Georgia. Wilson was a massive prospect at 6 feet 6 inches and over 350 pounds, and the Titans believed he could be their long-term answer at right tackle. Coming off an AFC Championship game appearance, Tennessee saw him as a piece to solidify their offensive line and keep Derrick Henry's rushing attack dominant for years. But Wilson's NFL career collapsed almost immediately. As a rookie, he played just 4 total snaps all season. Off the field, he quickly developed a reputation for immaturity and poor discipline. He was placed on the COVID-19 list twice, was suspended for violating team rules, and was arrested for a DUI. Coaches publicly questioned his commitment, and by the end of the year, he was already on his way out. In 2021, the Titans traded him to the Miami Dolphins for a late-round pick swap. Within 3 days, Miami released him after more off-field issues surfaced. Just 1 year after being a first-round pick, Wilson was effectively out of the NFL. Minnesota Vikings, Troy Williamson. In 2005, the Minnesota Vikings were reeling after trading away Randy Moss, one of the most dominant wide receivers in NFL history. With the 7th overall pick in the draft, they hoped to replace him by selecting Troy Williamson, a wideout from South Carolina. Williamson was known for his blazing speed. He ran a 4.3 in the 40-yard dash, and the Vikings believed he could stretch the field and bring back the deep threat that Moss had provided for years. But speed was about the only thing that translated. From the start, Williamson struggled with the basics of being an NFL receiver. He had trouble running precise routes, didn't create separation against physical corners, and most infamously, dropped passes at an alarming rate. His hands never caught up to his athletic ability, and the flashes of potential were few and far between. Over 3 seasons in Minnesota, Williamson managed just 79 catches for 1,067 yards and 3 touchdowns. He never topped 455 yards in a single year. Frustrated with his lack of progress, the Vikings traded him to the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2008 for a 6th-round pick, and within 2 years, he was out of the league entirely. Detroit Lions, Andre Ware. In 1990, the Detroit Lions held the 7th overall pick and used it on quarterback Andre Ware out of Houston. Ware had just won the Heisman Trophy after throwing for over 4,600 yards and 46 touchdowns in Houston's run-and-shoot offense. He was one of the most prolific college passers ever at that time, and Detroit believed his arm talent would translate to the NFL. But once he reached the pros, everything unraveled. The Lions ran a run-heavy offense built around Barry Sanders, and head coach Wayne Fontes never fully committed to tailoring the scheme to Ware's strengths. The run-and-shoot system that showcased him in college wasn't used in Detroit, and Ware struggled to adapt to a more traditional NFL offense. When he did see the field, he looked overwhelmed, completing just 51% of his passes and throwing only 5 touchdowns in 4 seasons with the team. Ware never earned the starting job, spending most of his career behind Rodney Peete and Eric Kramer. By 1994, he was out of the league, and attempts to revive his career in the CFL provided only brief flashes of the player he had been in college. For Detroit, the pick was another chapter in a long history of quarterback disappointments. Miami Dolphins, Dion Jordan. In 2013, the Miami Dolphins shocked everyone by trading up to the 3rd overall pick to select defensive end Dion Jordan out of Oregon. Jordan was one of the most athletic players in the draft, a 6'6" edge rusher who ran like a linebacker and had the versatility to drop into coverage. Miami believed they were getting a game-changing defender who could terrorize quarterbacks for years, but Jordan never came close to meeting those expectations. As a rookie, he recorded just 2 sacks in limited playing time. Coaches struggled to find the right role for him. He was too light to dominate as a pure pass rusher and too raw to be trusted in coverage. Instead of developing, his career unraveled with repeated suspensions for violating the league's substance abuse policy. Between 2014 and 2016, he played in only 12 games, missing the entire 2015 season. By the time he returned, Miami had moved on. He was released in 2017 after 4 seasons, finishing his Dolphins career with just 3 total sacks. Jordan later caught on with the Seahawks and Raiders in reserve roles, but he never came close to resembling the player Miami thought they had drafted. Denver Broncos, Ted Gregory. In 1988, the Denver Broncos were coming off back-to-back Super Bowl appearances and wanted to add more strength to their defensive line. With the 26th overall pick, they drafted defensive tackle Ted Gregory out of Syracuse. Gregory had been a standout in college, known for his quickness and disruptive ability inside. On paper, it looked like a strong late first-round selection for a team already contending, but the Broncos quickly realized they had made a massive mistake. Gregory had been listed at 6 feet 1 inch, 280 pounds, but when he arrived in Denver, he measured closer to 5 feet 9 inches and was undersized compared to most NFL linemen. Scouts had overlooked the discrepancy because of his production at Syracuse, but once he lined up against pro-level talent, his lack of size and strength became glaring. To make matters worse, Gregory suffered a knee injury early in training camp, further limiting any chance of development. He never played a single game for the Broncos. Before the regular season even began, Denver traded him to the New Orleans Saints, effectively giving up on their first-round pick just months after drafting him. Gregory played 1 year in New Orleans, starting 3 games, but was out of the league by 1989. Green Bay Packers, Rich Campbell. In 1981, the Green Bay Packers used the 6th overall pick on quarterback Rich Campbell out of California. Campbell had put up strong numbers in college, throwing for over 7,000 yards, and was considered one of the most accurate passers in the draft. Green Bay believed he could be the long-term answer at quarterback and revive a franchise that had been struggling since the Lombardi era. But Campbell never came close to living up to those expectations. From the start, scouts' concerns about his arm strength proved true. He lacked the velocity to consistently drive the ball downfield, and in Green Bay's system, he looked overmatched against NFL defenses. Coaches quickly lost faith in him, and he spent most of his 4 years with the team buried on the depth chart. When he did play, the results were disappointing. He attempted just 68 passes in his entire NFL career, throwing for 386 yards, with 3 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. By 1984, the Packers moved on, releasing Campbell after just 4 seasons. He never played another snap in the NFL. For a team that had bypassed future stars like Ronnie Lott and Mike Singletary to draft him, the miss was costly. Los Angeles Rams, Lawrence Phillips. In 1996, the St. Louis Rams took running back Lawrence Phillips with the 6th overall pick in the draft. On talent alone, the pick made sense. At Nebraska, Phillips had been one of the most explosive players in the country, rushing for over 1,700 yards in 1994 and helping the Cornhuskers win a national championship. He had size, speed, and power, and scouts believed he could be a generational back in the NFL. But Phillips also came into the league with serious off-field concerns. He had already faced legal issues and suspensions in college, and the Rams' decision to draft him was criticized as a gamble. Unfortunately for the Rams, those concerns quickly proved justified. On the field, Phillips never delivered. He rushed for just 632 yards as a rookie, showing flashes of his talent, but struggling with consistency. He often clashed with coaches, missed assignments, and failed to adjust to the professionalism of the NFL. Off the field, his legal troubles continued to mount, leading to suspensions and distracting from any chance of development. By 1997, less than 2 seasons after drafting him, the Rams released Phillips outright. He bounced around with the Dolphins and 49ers briefly, but his career never recovered. They passed on future Hall of Famers like Marvin Harrison and Ray Lewis to draft Phillips. Indianapolis Colts, Art Schlichter. In 1982, the Indianapolis Colts, then still in Baltimore, used the 4th overall pick on quarterback Art Schlichter out of Ohio State. Schlichter was a decorated college passer, setting multiple Big Ten records, and was seen as the perfect choice to stabilize the franchise. At the time, he had the size, accuracy, and mobility to fit the mold of a franchise quarterback. But Schlichter came into the NFL carrying a hidden problem, a gambling addiction that would ultimately derail his career before it really began. As a rookie, his on-field play was shaky. He threw for just 3 touchdowns against 12 interceptions, struggling to adjust to NFL defenses. But what was happening off the field was even worse. Schlichter was already deep into sports betting, and before long, his debts piled up. By his second season, he was suspended for gambling, missing the entire year. Attempts to revive his career in 1984 and 1985 failed, as his addiction continued to spiral. The Colts eventually cut ties with him, and Schlichter bounced around briefly in the CFL and Arena Football League. But his NFL career was effectively over after just 13 games. His gambling issues would later lead to repeated arrests and time in prison, overshadowing whatever promise he once had as a player. Seattle Seahawks, Rick Mirer. In 1993, the Seattle Seahawks held the 2nd overall pick in the draft and selected quarterback Rick Mirer out of Notre Dame. Coming out of college, Mirer was seen as a safe bet. He had the size, leadership, and experience that teams wanted in a franchise quarterback, and Seattle believed he would finally stabilize a position that had long been a problem for the team. At first, it seemed like the pick might work. As a rookie, Mirer threw for over 2,800 yards and 12 touchdowns, setting several rookie passing marks at the time. While the Seahawks finished just 6-10, there was optimism that he was the long-term answer. But after that first season, everything fell apart. Defenses quickly figured him out, and Mirer never adjusted. His accuracy was erratic, his decision-making poor, and he became turnover-prone. In 1994, he threw for just 2,350 yards with 11 touchdowns and 17 interceptions. The downward spiral continued, and his mechanics and confidence never recovered. By the end of his 4th season in Seattle, his record as a starter was 20-31, with more interceptions than touchdowns. The Seahawks traded him to the Chicago Bears in 1997, but he started only 3 games there and bounced around the league as a backup for several more years. He never came close to living up to the expectations of a number 2 overall pick. Pittsburgh Steelers, Huey Richardson. In 1991, the Pittsburgh Steelers used the 15th overall pick on linebacker Huey Richardson out of Florida. Richardson had been an All-American with the Gators, piling up tackles and sacks in the SEC, and Pittsburgh believed he could be the next great piece in a long tradition of dominant linebackers. At 6 feet 3 inches and nearly 250 pounds, he looked like the prototype. But once he entered the NFL, it quickly became apparent that Richardson wasn't ready for the pro game. He struggled with the transition to Pittsburgh's defensive schemes, often looking lost in coverage and ineffective as a pass rusher. His lack of explosiveness off the edge made it difficult for him to consistently beat NFL linemen, and he didn't have the instincts to make up for it. Despite being a first-round pick, Richardson barely saw the field as a rookie. The following offseason, new head coach Bill Cowher arrived, and Richardson wasn't part of his plans. After just 5 games with the Steelers, he was traded to the Washington Redskins for a 7th-round pick. He lasted 1 season there, then spent part of another with the Jets before his career was over. In total, he played only 16 games and recorded no sacks. New York Jets, Vernon Gholston. In 2008, the New York Jets had the 6th overall pick and used it on defensive end Vernon Gholston out of Ohio State. Gholston had been one of the most dominant defenders in college football, recording 14 sacks his final year and terrorizing Big Ten quarterbacks with his speed and strength. At 6 feet 3 inches and 266 pounds, he tested off the charts at the Combine, and the Jets believed they were drafting a franchise pass rusher who could anchor their defense for years. But once he reached the NFL, the dominance disappeared. Golston never recorded a single sack in his 3 seasons with the Jets, a stunning statistic for a top 6 pick drafted to pressure the quarterback. He struggled with technique, often looking stiff coming off the edge, and he couldn't translate his raw athleticism into consistent production. Coaches tried him at both defensive end and outside linebacker, hoping a different role might unlock his potential, but nothing worked. Worse, his effort and motor were often questioned. He rarely flashed the aggressiveness he had shown at Ohio State, and on a Jets defense that demanded toughness and grit, he looked out of place. By 2011, New York cut ties, releasing him before his rookie contract was even finished. Cincinnati Bengals, Akili Smith. In 1999, the Cincinnati Bengals held the 3rd overall pick in a draft loaded with quarterback talent. With Tim Couch and Donovan McNabb already off the board, Cincinnati selected Akili Smith out of Oregon. Smith had rocketed up draft boards after a stellar senior season where he threw 32 touchdowns in just 11 games. He had size, athleticism, and a big arm, and the Bengals believed they had finally found their franchise quarterback. But the jump from college to the NFL proved overwhelming. Smith held out for a long contract negotiation and missed most of training camp as a rookie, immediately putting him behind. When he did get on the field, his rawness showed. He struggled to read defenses, held the ball too long, and his mechanics broke down under pressure. In 17 career starts with the Bengals, he threw just 5 touchdowns against 13 interceptions and completed only 47% of his passes. The situation in Cincinnati didn't help. The roster was thin, the offensive line gave him little protection, and the team was mired in one of the darkest stretches in franchise history. Still, Smith never showed the growth expected from a top 3 pick. By 2002, he was released, and after brief stints in NFL Europe and the CFL, his career was over. For the Bengals, it was another crushing blow in their long history of draft struggles. In a class that produced Donovan McNabb, Dante Culpepper, and even a Super Bowl winning quarterback in Trent Dilfer, Cincinnati was left with one of the biggest busts of the era, New Orleans Saints, Russell Erxleben. In 1979, the New Orleans Saints made one of the strangest first-round picks in NFL history. With the 11th overall selection, they drafted Russell Erxleben, a punter and kicker out of Texas. Erxleben had been a legendary specialist in college, setting NCAA records for longest field goals, including a famous 67-yarder. The Saints believed his booming leg could change games by flipping field position and adding scoring range. But the decision to spend such a high pick on a punter was questionable from the start, and the results only made it worse. In his very first NFL game, Erxleben attempted a 57-yard field goal in overtime against the Falcons. The kick went disastrously wrong, sailing wide and short, and was returned for a touchdown that ended the game. That moment set the tone for his career. He never became a reliable kicker, struggling with both accuracy and consistency. Eventually, he was relegated solely to punting duties, where he was solid but never special enough to justify being drafted in the first round. By 1983, Erxleben was out of the NFL after just 4 seasons, finishing with a career field goal percentage under 50%. In a year where future Hall of Famers like Joe Montana, Kellen Winslow, and Dan Hampton were still on the board, New Orleans spent its first rounder on a specialist who gave them little return. Las Vegas Raiders, Jamarcus Russell. In 2007, the Raiders held the first overall pick in the draft and were desperate for a franchise quarterback. They chose Jamarcus Russell out of LSU, a massive 6 feet 6 inches, 265-pound passer with one of the strongest arms scouts had ever seen. His performance in the Sugar Bowl and his cannon-like throws at the Combine made him look like a generational prospect. Al Davis believed he was the kind of player who could restore the Raiders to greatness, but Russell became the definition of a draft bust. His rookie year began with a lengthy contract holdout, keeping him out of camp and delaying his development. When he did get on the field, he showed little command of the offense. He struggled with accuracy, decision-making, and leadership. Despite his arm strength, he couldn't consistently complete the basic throws needed to keep drives alive. In 3 seasons with the Raiders, he threw just 18 touchdowns against 23 interceptions. Questions about his work ethic and preparation followed him constantly. Coaches criticized his conditioning and lack of commitment, and he became infamous for showing up overweight to team activities. By 2010, just 3 years after being drafted first overall, Oakland released him. He never played another down in the NFL. Los Angeles Chargers, Ryan Leaf. In 1998, the San Diego Chargers, now Los Angeles, held the second overall pick in one of the most anticipated quarterback drafts ever. With Peyton Manning going first to the Colts, the Chargers selected Ryan Leaf out of Washington State. Leaf was a physical specimen at 6 feet 5 inches with a cannon arm, coming off a 33-touchdown season in college. Many scouts debated whether Leaf or Manning should be the first overall pick, and some believed Leaf had the higher ceiling. What followed was one of the most infamous careers in NFL history. From the start, Leaf's immaturity and lack of preparation became glaring issues. In his rookie season, he threw just 2 touchdowns against 15 interceptions, and quickly clashed with teammates, coaches, and the media. He became known for sideline outbursts, poor leadership, and a refusal to take accountability for mistakes. A memorable incident where he screamed at a reporter in the locker room further cemented his reputation. On the field, his play was even worse. Leaf finished his Chargers career with a record of 4-17 as a starter, throwing 13 touchdowns and 33 interceptions. Injuries piled on as well, including a major shoulder injury that robbed him of what little progress he was making. By 2001, just 3 years after being drafted, San Diego released him. Brief stints with the Cowboys and Seahawks went nowhere, and by 2002, his NFL career was over. In a draft where Indianapolis secured Peyton Manning, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, San Diego walked away with one of the biggest busts in league history. Ryan Leaf. This wasn't just a bust, it was a meltdown in real time. The 1998 NFL Draft came down to 2 quarterbacks, Peyton Manning, the polished son of a legend, and Ryan Leaf, the bigger, stronger gunslinger from Washington State. The Colts took Manning. The Chargers, desperate for their franchise quarterback, took Leaf and paid a steep price to move up and get him. At 6 feet 5 inches, 240 pounds, Leaf had the build of a prototype passer. He threw 33 touchdowns his final college season and looked the part of a generational arm talent. But everything else? It was a ticking time bomb. Leaf showed up cocky, uninterested in leadership, and allergic to accountability. He famously clashed with the San Diego media, especially one viral moment where he screamed at a reporter in the locker room. Teammates didn't trust him, and despite being handed the keys to a rebuilding franchise, he crashed the car almost immediately. His rookie season, 2 touchdowns, 15 interceptions, and a 39.0 passer rating. By year 3, he was gone, not just from San Diego, but out of the NFL altogether. But the story didn't end there. Years later, Leaf's life spiraled into addiction and arrests, including a prison sentence for burglary related to prescription drug theft. He eventually got clean and rebuilt his life, becoming a motivational speaker and analyst. Tony Mandarich. Tony Mandarich wasn't just hyped, he was manufactured into a myth. Dubbed the Incredible Bulk on the cover of Sports Illustrated, Mandarich was a 6'6", 315-pound offensive tackle out of Michigan State with 4.6 speed and biceps the size of tree trunks. People weren't just calling him a sure thing, they were calling him the greatest offensive line prospect ever. The Packers drafted him 2nd overall in 1989, ahead of Barry Sanders, Derek Thomas, and Deion Sanders. Let that sink in. But from the second he arrived in Green Bay, nothing clicked. Mandarich held out for a massive rookie contract, came into camp unprepared, and quickly looked overwhelmed by NFL speed. His technique was sloppy, his attitude was worse, and behind the scenes, he was battling demons the world didn't yet know about. He was addicted to painkillers. He later admitted to rampant steroid use throughout college, and without the chemical edge, the Incredible Bulk looked more like a bust in pads. He lasted just 3 seasons in Green Bay. Mandarich did attempt a comeback years later with the Colts, and actually played decently. But by then, the damage was done. His name became shorthand for draft day disaster. Jamarcus Russell. This one still hurts for Raiders fans. Jamarcus Russell had it all. A cannon arm, prototypical size, the swagger of a #1 pick. After lighting up the 2007 Sugar Bowl with LSU, the Raiders were convinced they had their franchise quarterback. They took him first overall and handed him a $61 million contract. What they got in return? A masterclass in unfulfilled potential. Russell showed up to camp overweight, reportedly tipping the scales near 300 pounds at one point. His work ethic? Almost non-existent. Coaches would give him blank game tapes labeled playbook just to test if he watched them. He'd come back saying he loved the film. That's how bad it got. On the field, it was even worse. He couldn't read defenses, he held the ball too long, and his mechanics collapsed under pressure. In 3 seasons, he threw 18 touchdowns and 23 picks. Fans turned, coaches lost hope, and by 2010, he was out of the league. Every time a new QB flames out, people ask, but was he Jamarcus bad? That's the legacy. Jeff George. Jeff George was a quarterback with a golden arm and a silver tongue, and that tongue got him in more trouble than any corner blitz ever did. Coming out of Illinois, he was hailed as the next big thing. The Colts took him with the #1 pick in 1990, hoping he'd be the new face of their franchise. But instead of leadership, they got chaos. George had all the tools, but none of the traits. He clashed with coaches, alienated teammates, and got into sideline shouting matches that went viral before viral was even a thing. He didn't win games. He blamed others for losing them, and that attitude followed him wherever he went. He bounced from Indy to Atlanta to Oakland to Minnesota to Washington, always showing flashes, but never leading. And despite throwing for over 27,000 yards in his career, he'll always be remembered more for the drama than the dimes. Lawrence Phillips. Few players entered the NFL with as much baggage as Lawrence Phillips, and few left behind a darker legacy. Coming out of Nebraska, Phillips was a dominant, violent runner with terrifying power and rare explosiveness. On the field, he looks like a future Hall of Famer, but off the field, the red flags were impossible to ignore. He had already been arrested for assaulting his girlfriend before entering the draft, yet the Rams still took him 6th overall in 1996, believing they could fix him. They couldn't. Phillips never became the star they hoped for. He fumbled often, clashed with coaches, and struggled to adjust to the NFL. But it was his off-the-field issues that ultimately ended his career. Multiple arrests, violent incidents, a reputation that followed him everywhere he went, from the Rams to the Dolphins to the 49ers to the CFL. After football, things only got worse. In 2009, he was sentenced to 31 years in prison for multiple violent crimes. And in 2016, Lawrence Phillips was found dead in his prison cell, an apparent suicide. He was 40 years old. Robert Griffin III. In 2012, he wasn't just a star, he was a phenomenon. Robert Griffin burst into the NFL like a lightning bolt. The Heisman winner was taken 2nd overall by Washington and immediately became the face of the franchise. He had blazing speed and a rocket arm. His rookie season? Unbelievable. He threw for 20 touchdowns, rushed for 7 more, and took Washington to the playoffs. He won Offensive Rookie of the Year and looked like the future of football, but it all fell apart fast. In the playoffs, head coach Mike Shanahan controversially left Griffin in the game with an injured knee. It got worse. He tore his ACL and LCL and was never the same again. He rushed back too quickly, struggled in year 2, and then got caught in the middle of coaching chaos, offensive line problems, and constant media pressure. The magic was gone. By 2015, he was benched in favor of Kirk Cousins. By 2016, he was cut. He bounced to Cleveland, then to Baltimore as a backup. But the player who once took over the league was never able to get it back. Injuries, poor management, and bad timing turned one of the most electric quarterbacks we'd ever seen into a what-if. Andre Bruce, the only linebacker ever taken with the #1 overall pick. In 1988, the Atlanta Falcons saw Andre Bruce, a 6'5", 270-pound athletic freak from Auburn, and thought they were drafting the next Lawrence Taylor. He looked the part, long frame, explosive first step, dominated college. But in the NFL, he never came close. Across 4 seasons with Atlanta, Bruce started just 42 games and recorded a total of 16 sacks, less than 4 per year. For a top pick meant to anchor a defense, it wasn't just underwhelming, it was invisible. He later played 6 more seasons with the Raiders, but mostly as a backup or rotational player. He never made a Pro Bowl, never changed a game, and he certainly never lived up to being the #1 pick. Robert Gallery. Coming out of Iowa in 2004, Robert Gallery was hyped as one of the safest picks in the draft. A 6 feet 7 inches, 325-pound offensive tackle with elite athleticism. Scouts called him a can't-miss prospect. The Raiders made him the #2 overall pick, expecting to plug him in as a dominant blindside protector for the next decade. But almost immediately, things went sideways. Gallery struggled badly at left tackle, getting beat by speed rushers, bull rushers, pretty much everyone. He was constantly flagged for holding and false starts, and after 2 disappointing seasons, the Raiders gave up on the idea of him playing left tackle altogether. They moved him inside to guard, where he was serviceable. But you don't take a guard with the 2nd pick in the draft. And worse, this was a draft loaded with Hall of Famers: Larry Fitzgerald, Phillip Rivers, Sean Taylor, Vince Wilfork. The Raiders could have taken any of them. Art Schlichter. When the Colts took Art Schlichter with the 4th overall pick in 1982, they believed they were getting a game-changing quarterback. He had been a star at Ohio State, a dual-threat quarterback with a big arm, quick feet, and the charisma to lead a franchise. But what they didn't realize was that Schlichter had a hidden addiction, not to alcohol or drugs, but to gambling, and it destroyed everything. Before he even threw a touchdown in the NFL, he was already tens of thousands of dollars in debt. He was placing bets on college basketball, NFL games, and horse races. He even bet on games he played in. The addiction spiraled out of control. Schlichter got suspended by the league. He tried to mount comebacks, but every time, the gambling dragged him back under. Eventually, he was forced out of football entirely, and his legal issues just kept piling up. Fraud, forgery, scams. By the time his story fully unfolded, Schlichter had served multiple stints in prison. He played in just 13 NFL games, with 3 interceptions and 0 touchdowns. Art Schlichter had the talent to be a star, but he couldn't escape the demons he brought with him into the league. Josh Rosen. He was nicknamed the Chosen Rosen, a UCLA star with a textbook throwing motion, NFL-ready footwork, and a chip on his shoulder the size of California. He was confident, too confident, some said. When the Cardinals drafted him 10th overall in 2018, Rosen famously declared, "There were 9 mistakes made ahead of me, but just 1 year later, he was gone." Rosen struggled from the start. The Cardinals had no offensive line, no stability, and fired their head coach after 1 season. Rosen was thrown to the Wolves, and the Wolves devoured him. He threw 14 interceptions and just 11 touchdowns. And after Arizona got the #1 pick in 2019, they took Kyler Murray and sent Rosen to Miami. That's when the freefall began. Rosen bounced from team to team: Dolphins, Buccaneers, 49ers, Falcons, Browns, Vikings. He never started another full season. In just a few years, he went from top 10 pick to forgotten backup to out of the league entirely. No injuries, no scandals, just a guy who was supposed to be a franchise savior and never came close. Jeff Okudah. He was supposed to be the next lockdown corner. Coming out of Ohio State in 2020, Okudah was considered the cleanest cornerback prospect in years. Tall, fast, physical, and polished. A can't-miss pick. The Lions took him 3rd overall, their highest defensive back selection since 1956. But the NFL humbled him quickly. In his rookie season, he gave up multiple big plays, struggled with speed receivers, and battled injuries. He tore his Achilles in week 1 of his 2nd year, and by the time he returned, he had lost a step. Detroit, meanwhile, was changing regimes, and the new coaching staff had little patience. In 2023, he was traded to the Falcons for a 5th-round pick, a shocking fall for a former top 3 selection. He struggled in Atlanta too. More injuries, more missed tackles, and less impact. By 2024, he was barely seeing the field. It wasn't just that he didn't live up to the hype, it's that he never even got close. Injuries, instability, and maybe, just maybe, a player who looked better in college than he ever would in the pros. Sam Darnold. He was supposed to save the Jets. When New York drafted him 3rd overall in 2018, fans were ecstatic. Finally, a franchise quarterback with poise, size, and arm talent. Darnold had lit up USC with his fearless throws and improvisation. The Jets believed they had their guy, but they failed him from the start. Bad offensive lines, no weapons, rotating coaches. Darnold showed flashes, like his dazzling 2019 game against the Cowboys. But those moments were rare. More often, he looked lost. By 2020, he was seeing ghosts on national TV against the Patriots. That clip became a meme. He was traded to the Panthers in 2021, hoping a fresh start would revive his career. It didn't. He still struggled with turnovers and poor decisions. The confidence he once had, gone. Injuries piled up. So did the losses. And by 2022, he was just another backup bouncing around the league. Joey Harrington. When the Detroit Lions drafted Joey Harrington with the 3rd overall pick in 2002, they believed they were finally getting their franchise quarterback. He had it all on paper, a decorated college career at Oregon, Heisman buzz, and the nickname Joey Heisman. He was smart, polished, and came off like the perfect leader. Detroit thought he could be the face of the franchise for the next decade, but they forgot one thing. They were the Lions. Harrington was thrown into a disaster. The offensive line was weak. The run game was non-existent. The receivers couldn't separate. And instead of being nurtured, he was fed to the wolves, starting 12 games as a rookie and getting hit from every direction. Still, fans were patient. But as the years went on, his play never improved. He was erratic under pressure. He forced throws, and despite all the chances, he never looked like a franchise guy. In 4 years with Detroit, he won just 18 games and threw 85 interceptions to only 79 touchdowns. After that, he bounced around. A backup in Miami, a stopgap in Atlanta, a forgotten name in New Orleans. It wasn't all his fault. The Lions gave him no support. But in the end, Joey Harrington never lived up to the hype. Rick Mirer. He was supposed to be the next Joe Montana. Coming out of Notre Dame in 1993, Rick Mirer had the hype, the size, the pedigree. He'd started 4 years for the Fighting Irish, drew comparisons to Hall of Famers, and was taken 2nd overall by the Seattle Seahawks, the highest QB pick in franchise history at the time. And his rookie year? It wasn't bad. He set several records for first-year quarterbacks and even finished 2nd in Offensive Rookie of the Year voting. But after that, everything unraveled. His accuracy issues became a major problem. His decision-making never improved. And instead of progressing, Mirer regressed. By the end of year 4 in Seattle, he had more interceptions than touchdowns and had led the team to a miserable 20-31 record. The Seahawks gave up on him and traded him to the Bears for a first-round pick, one of the worst trades in Chicago history. In Chicago, he never started a game. He bounced around to 5 more teams, never sticking, never delivering. Mirer finished his career with 50 touchdowns and 76 interceptions. He was out of the league by 2004. Ki-Jana Carter. He was supposed to be the next great running back. The Bengals took him with the #1 overall pick in the 1995 draft, the first running back to go 1st overall since Bo Jackson. Carter was a dominant force at Penn State, racking up over 1,500 rushing yards and 23 touchdowns his junior year. He had elite speed, incredible burst, and was seen as the franchise savior in Cincinnati. But before he ever played a regular season snap, it was already over. In his very first preseason game, Carter tore his ACL on just his 3rd carry. Back then, ACL tears were career-altering, and Carter was never the same again. He came back the next year, but he had lost a step. The explosiveness was gone. Injuries kept piling up. A dislocated kneecap, wrist problems, a broken arm. Over the next 7 seasons, he never once started more than 5 games in a season. He bounced from Cincinnati to Washington, then to New Orleans, but he never reclaimed the dominance he showed in college. Carter finished his career with just 1,144 rushing yards and 20 total touchdowns, far from what you'd expect from a #1 pick. His story is one of the ultimate what-ifs in NFL history, a can't-miss prospect who never had a real chance to show what he could have been. Akili Smith. He had one incredible college season, and it made the Bengals believe he was the future. After throwing 32 touchdowns at Oregon in 1998, Akili Smith skyrocketed up draft boards. The Bengals picked him 3rd overall in 1999, hoping he'd finally solve their never-ending quarterback problem. But he wasn't ready. Smith only had 1 full year as a college starter, and it showed. He struggled to read defenses, hesitated in the pocket, and never looked comfortable running an NFL offense. His rookie season? Just 2 touchdowns in 7 starts. By year 2, he was already getting benched. Cincinnati tried to develop him, but the mechanics, the decision-making, the leadership, none of it ever came together. He started just 17 games in 4 years, throwing 5 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. By 2003, he was out of the league. Akili Smith had the arm talent and athleticism, but not the experience or polish. The Bengals ignored the red flags and paid the price. It's a harsh reminder that one great college year doesn't always mean NFL success. Charles Rogers, he was supposed to be the next big thing, a hometown hero with elite speed and hands. The Detroit Lions drafted Charles Rogers 2nd overall in 2003, dreaming he'd be the superstar wideout they desperately needed. At Michigan State, he was electric, breaking records, torching defenses, but the NFL never got to see that version of him. In just his 5th game as a rookie, Rogers broke his collarbone during a routine practice drill. The very next year, he broke the same collarbone on his first reception of the season. That kind of back-to-back injury luck? Devastating. And that was just the start. Rogers struggled off the field with substance abuse issues and was suspended multiple times for violating the league's drug policy. His relationship with the team deteriorated fast, and by 2006, he was out of the league entirely, with just 36 career receptions. It was a tragic fall. Charles Rogers had every tool to be elite, but injuries, addiction, and off-the-field issues stole his career before it ever had a chance to take off. He passed away in 2019 at just 38 years old. Zach Wilson. At BYU, he looked like a magician. Lightning-fast release, off-platform throws, swagger for days. The Jets saw a franchise savior. They took Wilson 2nd overall in 2021, a bold pick in a stacked quarterback class. He was supposed to bring New York football back to life, but the reality? It unraveled fast. Wilson struggled mightily as a rookie. Poor accuracy, bad reads, and a total lack of command. In year 2, instead of taking a leap, things got worse. He lost the locker room, the media turned on him, and after one brutal performance against the Patriots, he gave a now infamous answer when asked if he'd let the defense down. He said, "No." That one word might have ended his time in New York. He was benched, booed, and by 2023, demoted behind backups. The Jets brought in Aaron Rodgers, signaling they'd already moved on. By 2024, Wilson was traded away, not as a starter, not even as a future project, just a reminder of what didn't work. He's still in the league, but not as the face of anything. Zach Wilson's fall was rapid, from golden-armed prospect to backup purgatory. Trey Lance. He was the ultimate mystery box. A 6'4" quarterback with a cannon arm, elite athleticism, and only one full season of college football at North Dakota State. But what a season it was. 28 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and a national championship. The 49ers were sold. They traded 3 first-round picks to move up and draft him 3rd overall in 2021. The plan? Sit him behind Jimmy Garoppolo, develop him slowly, and unleash the future of the franchise. But the future never came. Injuries slowed everything. A broken finger in preseason, a sprained knee, and then a fractured ankle in 2022 that wiped out his entire season. When he finally got chances, he looked raw. Inconsistent footwork, slow reads, struggled with accuracy. Meanwhile, a 7th-round pick named Brock Purdy started lighting it up. And just like that, Lance went from face of the franchise to 3rd string. By 2023, San Francisco traded him to Dallas for a 4th-round pick. A stunning fall for someone they once gave up the world to get. Trey Lance might still find his moment, but so far, he's one of the biggest what-ifs in modern draft history. Justin Blackmon. He was built to dominate. At Oklahoma State, Blackmon was unstoppable. Back-to-back Biletnikoff Awards as the nation's top receiver, over 1,500 yards in 2 straight seasons, and 38 touchdowns in 3 years. He was physical, fast, reliable, and explosive. A top 5 pick in 2012 felt like a lock. The Jaguars made it official, taking him 5th overall. And early on, he flashed everything they hoped for, including a 236-yard game as a rookie. Still one of the best days by a rookie wideout ever. But Blackmon's career was derailed off the field. First came a DUI before he even signed his rookie deal. Then, multiple violations of the NFL's substance abuse policy. He was suspended indefinitely in 2014 and never played another down in the league. It wasn't a lack of talent. His tape showed elite ability, but addiction, poor decision-making, and a lack of structure ended a career that should have been great. He played just 20 NFL games. And for Jaguars fans, Justin Blackmon isn't remembered for what he did, but for everything he could have been. Steve Emtman. He was supposed to be a franchise cornerstone. At the University of Washington, Emtman was a force of nature. In 1991, he won the Lombardi Award, finished fourth in Heisman, voting as a defensive lineman, and led the Huskies to a national championship. He was fast, powerful, and fundamentally dominant. The clear-cut #1 overall pick in the 1992 NFL Draft. The Colts took him to anchor their defense for the next decade, but Emtman's body had other plans. In just his rookie year, he tore his ACL. In year 2, he ruptured a disc in his neck. In year 3, another knee injury. Each comeback was met with another devastating setback. He ended up starting just 18 games for the Colts over 3 seasons, before bouncing around to Miami and Washington in limited roles. Despite flashes of the player he once was, his body simply couldn't hold up. Emtman retired by 27. Derek Harvey. The Jaguars thought they were getting a game wrecker. Instead, they got one of the biggest letdowns in franchise history. Coming out of Florida, Derek Harvey was fresh off a national championship and a dominant performance in the BCS title game. He looked the part. Long arms, quick burst, SEC pedigree, everything a top defensive end should be. Jacksonville believed he'd anchor their pass rush for years, trading up to take him 8th overall in 2008. But it unraveled fast. First came the contract holdout. Harvey missed all of training camp and the preseason. Then came the slow start. He recorded just 8.5 sacks in 3 full seasons. For comparison, several players taken after him hit that number in their rookie year alone. He lacked instincts, got manhandled in run defense, and never adjusted to NFL speed. By 2011, he was cut. By 2012, he was gone. He played just 4 total seasons in the league. Jason Smith. He was supposed to protect the future. Instead, he became the face of a failed rebuild. The Rams drafted Jason Smith 2nd overall in 2009, a massive offensive tackle out of Baylor who'd only recently switched from tight end. But scouts were enamored with his size, athleticism, and supposed ceiling. They saw a cornerstone left tackle who could anchor the line for the next decade. But Smith never adjusted. He struggled with the fundamentals, footwork, hand placement, leverage, and worst of all, he couldn't stay on the field. Concussions derailed his rookie season. Poor performance derailed the rest. By year 2, he'd already lost the starting job. By year 4, he was traded to the Jets for another draft bust, Wayne Hunter. And within a season, Smith was out of the NFL entirely. He played just 29 total games. Courtney Brown. He was the #1 overall pick in the 2000 NFL Draft. A physical freak, 6 feet 4 inches, 270 pounds, ran a 4.540, bench pressed 225 pounds 33 times, dominated at Penn State with 33 sacks in college, a school record, and the Cleveland Browns were desperate. They had just returned to the NFL as an expansion team and needed a cornerstone. Courtney Brown was supposed to be it, and at first, he showed flashes. 4.5 sacks as a rookie, then 4.5 in his first 5 games of year 2. But then, the injuries started. Knee injuries, foot problems, torn biceps, a dislocated elbow. It felt like every time he turned the corner, something else broke. And by 2006, he was out of the league entirely. For a guy once compared to Reggie White and Bruce Smith, Courtney Brown never came close to living up to the hype. Vernon Gholston. The Jets took him 6th overall in 2008. He looked like a superhero, 6 feet 3 inches, 265 pounds, insane strength, elite speed. He terrorized quarterbacks at Ohio State and destroyed the NFL Combine. New York thought they had found their next pass-rushing star. But there was one problem. He couldn't play football. Gholston never recorded a single sack in 3 full seasons. He didn't force a fumble. He barely even got on the field. Rex Ryan eventually called him one of the biggest disappointments of his career. Coaches said he looked the part, but didn't have the motor, didn't seem to even like the game. After the Jets cut him, he got tryouts with the Bears and Rams, but never made another active roster. He finished his career with 0 sacks and 0 starts. For a top 10 pick who was built like a Marvel character, Vernon Gholston might be the most physically gifted bust in NFL history. Blair Thomas. The Jets had the 2nd overall pick in 1990, and they used it on Penn State running back Blair Thomas, a Heisman finalist who ran for over 3,000 yards in college despite tearing his ACL. They thought he'd be the face of the franchise. Instead, he never even scored more than 3 touchdowns in a season. In 4 years with the Jets, Thomas rushed for just over 2,000 yards total. He never cracked 800 yards in a season, and despite being drafted to carry the offense, he was eventually benched for journeyman backs. Injuries didn't help, but coaches said he just didn't have that it factor in the pros. He was solid, but never special. The Jets gave up and let him walk. Thomas bounced around to the Patriots, Cowboys, Falcons, and Panthers, but never found a home. He ended his career with just 6 touchdowns total, which is the fewest by any running back ever taken in the top 2. And to make it worse, the Jets passed on Emmitt Smith to get him. Troy Williamson. When Randy Moss left the Vikings in 2005, they needed a replacement fast. So with the 7th overall pick, they drafted Troy Williamson, a blazing fast wide receiver from South Carolina. He ran a 4.32 40. He had hops, quickness, and raw speed that made scouts drool. But there was one problem. He couldn't catch. Williamson had the worst hands of any starting wide receiver in the league. Passes hit him in the chest and bounced off. He dropped open bombs that would have changed games. And it wasn't just a few bad plays, it was constant. In his rookie year, he caught just 24 passes. The next season, he dropped more passes than anyone in the NFL. And in 3 years with the Vikings, he scored just 3 total touchdowns. Coaches tried everything. New gloves, new techniques, even vision therapy. But nothing fixed it. And after just 3 seasons, Minnesota traded him to Jacksonville for a 6th-round pick. He played one more forgettable season, then vanished from the league. Williamson was supposed to replace a Hall of Famer. Instead, he became a punchline for what happens when you draft speed without skills. Jerry Rice Jr., being the son of the greatest wide receiver in NFL history, is both a blessing and a curse, and Jerry Rice Jr. found that out the hard way. He played college ball at UCLA and later transferred to UNLV as a graduate student to get more playing time. Though he showed flashes of solid route running and work ethic, he lacked his father's size, speed, and explosiveness. At 5'11", 185 pounds with average athletic testing, Jerry Jr. didn't turn many NFL heads. Still, the name opened some doors. In 2014, he received an invite to the 49ers rookie minicamp, his father's former team, and later signed a short-term deal with Washington. But he didn't make it out of training camp. He also had a brief stint with the Montreal Alouettes in the CFL, but even there, his career never truly got off the ground. Jerry Jr. eventually stepped away from football entirely, transitioning into tech sales and entrepreneurship. He simply couldn't replicate the GOAT gene. Deion Sanders Jr. Being the son of primetime came with expectations, but Deion Sanders Jr. wasn't exactly destined for NFL stardom. He played wide receiver and kick returner at Southern Methodist University, where his flashes of agility were often overshadowed by inconsistency on the field and distractions off of it. Though quick and flashy in his own right, he lacked the elite athleticism and instincts that made his dad a Hall of Famer. After college, Deion Jr. never got close to the NFL. He didn't receive a combine invite or any training camp offers. Instead, he pivoted quickly, becoming a lifestyle brand entrepreneur, launching Well Off Forever, a fashion and content brand that gained traction on YouTube and social media. Today, he's better known as a content creator, documenting the behind-the-scenes life of the Colorado Buffaloes, the team coached by his father and featuring his younger brother, Shadir Sanders. Deion Jr. never made it to the league, but instead of chasing a fading dream, he carved his own path. Marcus Vick. If there was ever a case of talent overshadowed by turmoil, it was Marcus Vick. The younger brother of NFL superstar Michael Vick, Marcus came into Virginia Tech with sky-high expectations. A dynamic dual-threat quarterback with a cannon for an arm and elite speed. He looked like a mirror image of his older brother, and for a time, he played like it. But off the field, Marcus struggled to stay out of trouble. During his college career, he was suspended for multiple infractions, including underage drinking, speeding, and allegedly providing alcohol to underage girls. He returned to the team, but the issues didn't stop. In the 2006 Gator Bowl, he famously stomped on a Louisville defender's leg, an incident caught on national television. Days later, Virginia Tech dismissed him from the program. That was effectively the end of his quarterback career. Marcus went undrafted, but briefly signed with the Miami Dolphins, not as a quarterback, but as a wide receiver. He played in just one game, recording no stats. After that, he faded from the league and became entangled in more legal trouble, including charges ranging from driving under the influence to resisting arrest. Dylan Favre. With the last name Favre stitched across his jersey, expectations were baked in from the moment Dylan picked up a football. As the nephew of Hall of Fame quarterback Brett Favre, Dylan played the same position and shared the same Mississippi roots. He even showed flashes of athleticism and a strong arm coming out of high school, enough to earn a spot at Mississippi State. But unlike his famous uncle, Dylan never made headlines for lighting up defenses. He redshirted his first year at MSU and eventually transferred to Pearl River Community College in search of playing time. After putting up solid but unspectacular numbers, he transferred again, this time to the University of Tennessee Martin, a small FCS school. Despite the multiple stops, Dylan never found enough consistency or production to garner NFL interest. He went undrafted, unsigned, and quietly faded from the spotlight. Nate Montana. When your dad is Joe Montana, a four-time Super Bowl champion and one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game, there's really no escaping the weight of that legacy. Nate Montana gave it a shot anyway, but his journey through football was defined more by transfers than touchdowns. Nate began his college career at Notre Dame, the same iconic program where his dad became a legend. But unlike Joe, Nate struggled to see the field. After redshirting his freshman year, he transferred to Pasadena City College to get reps, then returned to Notre Dame the next season, only to remain buried on the depth chart. Still searching for playing time, Nate transferred again, this time to the University of Montana in 2011. There, he finally earned some playing time, but posted modest stats, just 4 touchdowns to 5 interceptions across the season. After college, Nate went undrafted. He had a brief tryout with the 49ers, his father's old team, but didn't make the roster. No NFL team signed him, and Nate's pro career ended before it began. Duron Carter. Being the son of Hall of Fame wide receiver Chris Carter comes with serious expectations, and Duron Carter had the talent to draw NFL attention. He was tall, athletic, and had the flashy hands and swagger you'd expect from Chris's kid. But while the potential was there, the consistency and discipline were not. Duron began his college career at Ohio State, just like his dad, but academic issues kept him off the field. After one underwhelming season, he bounced between Alabama's junior college system and Florida Atlantic, never truly finding a stable home or making a significant on-field impact. Despite his rocky college resume, his raw talent earned him looks in the NFL. He had stints with the Minnesota Vikings, Indianapolis Colts, and a couple other teams, mostly practice squads or training camp invites, but he never played in a regular season NFL game. Ironically, it was in Canada where Duron finally flashed his star potential. He became a standout receiver in the CFL, known for highlight catches and dramatic moments, but also for his fiery temper and clashes with coaches. One of his most infamous moments came when he celebrated a touchdown by shoulder bumping an opposing head coach, igniting a sideline brawl. Ray Lewis III. As the son of legendary linebacker Ray Lewis, expectations were sky high for Ray Lewis III. In high school, he played both running back and defensive back at Lake Mary Prep in Florida, where he racked up more than 1,300 rushing yards and 18 touchdowns his senior year. Recruiters noticed the name, and his talent seemed legitimate enough to earn a spot at his father's alma mater, the University of Miami. But Ray III never played a down for the Hurricanes. After redshirting his freshman year in 2013, he transferred to Coastal Carolina University. That's where things began to unravel. His playing time was minimal, and in 2016, he was arrested on charges related to sexual assault. Though those charges were eventually dropped, the incident marked the end of his football career and any chance of making the NFL. Afterward, he drifted away from football entirely. Reports indicated he had struggled with mental health and drug use in the years that followed. Tragically, in June 2023, Ray Lewis III passed away from an accidental drug overdose at just 28 years old. Authorities reported a lethal mix of fentanyl, cocaine, and methamphetamine in his system. Ryan Neese, the son of Hall of Fame safety Ronnie Lott. Ryan Neese came into the football world with one of the most intimidating bloodlines imaginable. Lott was known for his bone-crushing hits and unmatched intensity. And while Neese didn't play the same position, he carried the expectation of greatness on his shoulders. Unlike many Nepo babies, Neese wasn't highly recruited out of high school, but he walked on at UCLA and earned his spot the hard way. By his senior year, he was a team captain and led the Bruins in tackles, eventually earning All-Pac 10 honors. That hard-nosed effort was enough to get him signed as an undrafted free agent by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2002. And here's the thing. Neese wasn't terrible. He carved out a decent role on special teams and as a backup linebacker. He even won a Super Bowl as a rookie with the Bucs under coach John Gruden. But despite flashes of promise, he never developed into a full-time starter. He played 6 seasons in the league, bounced between Tampa and Detroit, and quietly retired with 222 total tackles and just 1 sack to his name. Neese's career wasn't a complete failure. But compared to the Hall of Fame legacy his father left behind, it was a whisper. Anthony Dorsett Jr. As the son of legendary Cowboys running back Tony Dorsett, Anthony Dorsett Jr. had massive shoes to fill. His father was a Heisman Trophy winner, a Super Bowl champion, and a Hall of Famer who racked up over 12,000 rushing yards in the NFL. But Anthony didn't follow his dad's footsteps into the offensive backfield. He played on the other side of the ball as a safety. Coming out of the University of Texas, Dorsett Jr. was drafted in the 6th round of the 1996 NFL Draft by the Houston Oilers. His rookie season was forgettable, but he eventually carved out a role with the team, which became the Tennessee Titans. He started all 16 games in 1999. And helped the Titans reach Super Bowl 34, a game they famously lost to the Rams by 1 yard. Dorsett's NFL career wasn't short. He played 8 seasons, starting 53 games, but his production was minimal. He recorded just 3 interceptions and 1 sack over his entire career. And while his last name opened doors, it also brought expectations he couldn't live up to. Unlike his father, Anthony never made a Pro Bowl or came close to Hall of Fame consideration. He bounced from the Titans to the Raiders, where he started another Super Bowl and lost again. 2 Super Bowl appearances sound impressive on paper, but Dorsett was never a game changer. His career ended quietly after the 2003 season, and he faded from the spotlight. Casey Matthews. Casey Matthews came from one of the most iconic football bloodlines in NFL history. His father, Clay Matthews Jr., was a 4-time Pro Bowl linebacker. His uncle, Bruce Matthews, is in the Hall of Fame. His older brother, Clay Matthews III, was a 6-time Pro Bowler and Super Bowl champion with the Packers. With that kind of pedigree, expectations were generational. Casey played college ball at Oregon and was part of their national title run in the 2010 season. He was a solid linebacker with good instincts and leadership, and that earned him a 4th-round selection in the 2011 NFL Draft by the Philadelphia Eagles. His rookie year started with promise. He was named the starting middle linebacker in Week 1, but that didn't last long. He struggled in coverage, missed tackles, and was quickly demoted. Over 4 seasons in Philadelphia, Casey was mostly a rotational linebacker and special teamer. He never recorded more than 66 tackles in a single season and finished his Eagles career with just 4 sacks and 1 interception. In 2015, he signed with the Minnesota Vikings, hoping for a fresh start. But that opportunity never came. A hip injury sidelined him during training camp, and he was placed on injured reserve. He never played another NFL snap. Craig Cassidy. Craig Cassidy had football royalty in his blood. His father, Howard Hopalong Cassidy, was a Heisman Trophy winner at Ohio State in 1955 and a college football legend. When Craig followed in his father's footsteps to play for the Buckeyes, fans were eager to see if he could carry the torch. But while his dad lit up scoreboards and won national acclaim, Craig's football journey was far more modest. At Ohio State in the early 1970s, Craig played defensive back. He was a decent contributor and earned a starting role during his senior year, but he never had the star power or production his father did. His draft stock was limited, but the New Orleans Saints gave him a shot, signing him as an undrafted free agent in 1977. Craig appeared in 11 games during the 1977 season, mostly on special teams. He recorded just one career interception and saw limited action on defense. After that one season, he disappeared from the NFL altogether. David Grayson Jr. was born into football legacy. His father, Dave Grayson, was a standout defensive back who played in both the AFL and NFL, making multiple all-star teams and earning a place on the AFL all-time team. With such pedigree, expectations for David Jr. were high. But matching a Hall of Fame level resume is no easy task. Grayson Jr. played linebacker at Fresno State in the early 1990s, where he showed flashes of potential. He was undersized for the position, but made up for it with instincts and tenacity. His play caught enough attention for the Dallas Cowboys to sign him as an undrafted free agent in 1993. He managed to stick around the league for a few seasons, bouncing between the Cowboys, Browns, and Chargers. In total, he played in 32 games over 4 seasons, mostly contributing on special teams and in backup roles. He never started an NFL game and recorded just one career sack. Max McCaffrey. As the eldest son of Super Bowl champion Ed McCaffrey and older brother to NFL superstar Christian McCaffrey, Max McCaffrey had football in his bloodline. A wide receiver by position, he played his college ball at Duke, where he had a solid but unspectacular career. He finished with over 1,300 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns. Respectable numbers, but not the kind that turn heads at the NFL Combine. He went undrafted in 2016, but was quickly signed by the Oakland Raiders. Over the next few years, Max would become the definition of a journeyman receiver. He bounced from team to team: Packers, Saints, Jaguars, 49ers, and even his dad's own Panthers, rarely cracking the active roster. His most notable moment came during a short stint with the 49ers in 2017, when he briefly saw playing time in regular season games. He caught one pass in his NFL career, just one, for 4 yards. Despite having the pedigree, the looks, and the work ethic, Max simply couldn't make it stick in the league. Whether it was a lack of elite athleticism or bad timing, he never found his footing as a reliable contributor. He later tried his hand at coaching under his father at Northern Colorado, but even that tenure ended quietly. Kevin Matthews. As the son of Hall of Famer Bruce Matthews, brother of Pro Bowl tackle Jake Matthews, and cousin to Clay Matthews III, Kevin Matthews entered the NFL with one of the most iconic last names in football. The Matthews family tree is loaded with all-pros, Pro Bowlers, and legends. Expectations were sky high. Kevin played center at Texas A&M, and while solid, was never considered an elite prospect. He went undrafted in 2010, but signed with the Tennessee Titans, coincidentally the team where his father had spent most of his career. It felt symbolic, like a passing of the torch, but Kevin never became more than a depth piece. He appeared in just 17 games over 4 seasons, bouncing between the Titans, Redskins, and Panthers, mostly spending time on practice squads. Injuries, including a high ankle sprain and lingering foot issues, limited his availability, and he never managed to climb into a consistent starting role. Cody Grimm. As the son of Hall of Fame offensive lineman Russ Grimm, a member of the legendary Hogs unit for Washington, Cody Grimm entered the NFL with big shoes to fill, though on the opposite side of the ball. While his father was a punishing blocker, Cody was a gritty safety, known more for his effort than elite athleticism. Cody played his college ball at Virginia Tech, where he went from a walk-on to a full-time starter by his senior year. He developed a reputation as a tough, instinctive player who made up for his physical limitations with heart and hustle. Despite his college production, he wasn't highly touted entering the NFL draft and was selected in the 7th round by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2010. Surprisingly, Grimm cracked the starting lineup as a rookie due to injuries in the secondary. He even recorded a pick 6 against the Panthers and looked like a hidden gem. But his NFL journey was cut short almost as quickly as it began. A broken left fibula ended his rookie season prematurely, and the following year, A second injury to the same leg sent him to injured reserve again. In total, Grimm only appeared in 23 NFL games over 3 seasons. Injuries robbed him of any real chance to build momentum. While his football IQ and work ethic were never questioned, his body simply couldn't hold up to the rigors of the league. Chris Sims. Chris Sims, the son of Super Bowl winning quarterback Phil Simms, had everything you'd expect from a top-tier NFL legacy. He was tall, had a strong arm, and came from a football-rich bloodline. Growing up around NFL locker rooms, he was groomed to be the next great Sims undercenter. He started at Ramapo High School in New Jersey and eventually committed to play at the University of Texas, one of the biggest stages in college football. At Texas, Sims was part of a high-profile quarterback battle with Major Applewhite, a fan favorite. While Sims had the measurables and was projected as the better NFL prospect, his inconsistency, especially in big games, frustrated Longhorn fans. He finished his college career with solid numbers, but never quite reached the level expected of someone with his name and pedigree. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers drafted Sims in the 3rd round of the 2003 NFL Draft. He was seen as a developmental project behind veteran Brad Johnson. He eventually got his chance in 2005, leading the Bucs to the playoffs and throwing for over 2,000 yards in just 10 starts. For a brief moment, it looked like he might carve out a respectable NFL career. But then came the injury that changed everything. In a 2006 game against the Panthers, Sims took a series of hits to the midsection. After finishing the game, he was rushed to the hospital, where doctors removed his spleen. The injury was life-threatening, and though he attempted a comeback, he was never the same player again. His mobility and confidence took a hit, and he bounced around briefly with the Titans and Broncos before retiring. Jarrett Payton, the son of NFL legend Walter Payton, inherited not only one of the most iconic last names in football history, but also the burden of expectations that came with it. As the son of Sweetness, one of the greatest running backs of all time, Jarrett's football journey was constantly under a microscope. He played college ball at the University of Miami, a school loaded with talent. After spending the early part of his college career in the shadow of players like Clinton Portis and Willis McGahee, Jarrett finally got his chance to shine in his senior year. He started 10 games and rushed for over 1,000 yards, including a standout performance in the 2004 Orange Bowl, where he earned MVP honors. It was the kind of breakout game that made people think maybe, just maybe, he was ready to carry on the Payton legacy at the next level. But the NFL wasn't as welcoming. Jarrett went undrafted in 2004, eventually signing with the Tennessee Titans. He spent most of his time on the practice squad and never played a regular season game for them. In 2005, he looked north to Canada and signed with the Montreal Alouettes of the CFL. He showed flashes, rushing for nearly 700 yards in one season, but never quite broke through as a star. He later tried to revive his NFL career with a brief stint with the Bears, his father's team, but it didn't pan out. Kellen Winslow II. Kellen Winslow II entered the NFL with the kind of hype most players can only dream of. He was the son of Kellen Winslow Sr., a Hall of Fame tight end who revolutionized the position in the 1980s. And just like his father, Kellen II had size, athleticism, and swagger. He dominated at the University of Miami, earning All-American honors and being drafted 6th overall by the Cleveland Browns in 2004. But from the very beginning, things didn't go according to plan. In just his second game as a rookie, Winslow suffered a broken fibula. He was sidelined for the rest of the season. Then came the motorcycle accident. In the 2005 offseason, Winslow crashed while doing tricks in a parking lot. Despite having a clause in his contract forbidding such activities, he tore his ACL and missed the entire season again. The Browns, already frustrated, withheld a portion of his salary. When he finally returned in 2006, he showed flashes of his elite potential, posting a 1,100-yard season and making the Pro Bowl in 2007. But even in his best years, he was a locker room distraction. He clashed with coaches and teammates, had public disputes with team doctors, and never quite lived up to the greatest tight end ever label he once gave himself. as his playing career wound down with stints in Tampa Bay, New England, and the Jets. Winslow's off-field behavior became more troubling. He was arrested multiple times, and in 2018 he was charged and later convicted in a highly disturbing criminal case that brought his life completely off the rails. Bobby Carpenter. Bobby Carpenter came into the NFL with the kind of pedigree teams love. He was a standout linebacker at Ohio State, the son of former NFL running back Rob Carpenter, and a key part of a Buckeyes defense that had a reputation for producing pros. Drafted 18th overall by the Dallas Cowboys in 2006, expectations were high. He had the size, athleticism, and college resume that made him look like a can't-miss pick, but it never clicked. As a rookie, Carpenter struggled to find the field. He played mostly on special teams and had just 11 total tackles all year. And in the following seasons, he couldn't crack the starting lineup, falling behind more physical, consistent linebackers. Despite getting chances in multiple defensive schemes, he was often criticized for shying away from contact and missing assignments. Fans in Dallas began to turn on him. He became a punchline, most famously on a 2010 episode of Hard Knocks, where former teammate Mark Colombo mocked him, calling him Barbie Carpenter after he failed to make a play during practice. After 4 underwhelming seasons with the Cowboys, he was traded to the Rams and was released within a month. Then came brief stops in Miami, Detroit, and New England. In total, Carpenter started just 10 games in a 7-year NFL career. He became better known for his media appearances and college legacy than for anything he did as a pro. Barry J. Sanders. Barry J. Sanders had one of the heaviest names in football history. As the son of Barry Sanders, the most electrifying running back to ever play the game, expectations were sky high before he ever stepped on a college field. But instead of following in his father's footsteps to Oklahoma State, Barry J. chose a different path: Stanford. At Stanford, he redshirted his freshman year and spent most of his career as a backup, buried behind Christian McCaffrey on the depth chart. While he flashed quickness and elusiveness in limited action, he never cracked the rotation in a meaningful way. Over 3 seasons, he rushed for just 315 total yards and 4 touchdowns. In 2016, he transferred to Oklahoma State as a graduate student, finally donning the same uniform his father once wore. It felt like a full circle moment. But even then, he couldn't win the starting job. He played in 13 games, but managed just 93 rushing yards on the season. The narrative wasn't redemption. It was disappointment. After college, Barry J. Sanders didn't pursue a professional football career. Instead, he transitioned into media and business, eventually working in marketing for EA Sports. He never tried to be his father, but the shadow was impossible to escape. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed. Thanks for watching.